Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is David Palmer, Leo King, and we are here on highvibe.tv for one of my old shows that has been brought back just because, we went through a crazy 2020 after dark, and hope everybody's doing wonderful out there. It is the evening of January the 12th of 2021, this new moon in Capricorn here. And this is the show, of course, where we do a roundtable discussion and always have a special guest. So tonight, of course, we got our High Vibe team. We got Ann, who's here with us tonight. We got Erika, and we got special guests, Mr. David Avocado Wolfe himself, the Leo. He's a Leo, if y'all don't know out there. I hooked him up with the Leo part of the stage, too. Good to have you on, man, and everybody else, too.
Thank you. Stoked, and really have been appreciating your hospitality here. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I've been watching you for so long, over a decade, probably a Jupiter return since we're in Jupiter and Aquarius. And it's just been so awesome that how just naturally things happen and you and I connected. We're both Davids, we're both Leos.
And similar in many ways. I mean,
I know.
I look at your life, I'm like, that was like a total, this is my life when I was probably your age. Exactly.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's so interesting.
I've been loving it.
And then talking to your stepdad today, it was the same story there. I was like, oh, he's like just another 10, 15, 20 years behind, ahead of us.
Right. It's
incredible.
Crazy. But there's a similar story, I feel like, and we were actually just talking about this kind of energy of a natural flow in life and everything starting to connect. But that's what's been weird about the things in 2020 and 2021 here, because it doesn't feel like 2020 ended, if that makes sense. Like, I think the whole Gregorian calendar system is getting blown up because it's off. Even the Earth's rotation messed up 28 times, where at 1.5 milliseconds, the rotation's off. They want to take 1 second off the Gregorian calendar because we're having that much magnetic mess up with the poles. So it's been so weird, but everything that's not in flow is so easy to see right now.
I think we're going to get into that.
I want to get into that. And actually, I want to get into this with you to start the show off with, David. So we all know you as Avocado. I mean, and we know you in the health and wellness community as, you have been the beacon of light, the Leo that has shown the way for so many years, decades. And it's been awesome watching you in the media, to your own platforms, to your own channels, and all over, and speaking all over the world. And so many people look up to you, your books. So many people are just like, oh my gosh, I have all his superfood books are sitting in my, like right next door to my bed. Like, they live with you. So it's like, that is so awesome. But I wanted to get the spiritual man behind the man tonight with you. Because on High Vibe here, we talk about everything. We get real deep into everything that's going on in the world, the universe, and wherever we're feeling. And I just, everybody knows so much about where you're at, and I'd love to get so much of what creates the man that has created this beautiful way to help humanity understand health better and lifestyle better, because it's all spiritual and it's all connected. And you do such a great job of it because you don't make people feel like, you're not doing this right. You've always been the cool guy that made it so easy and so integratable. Cool, especially when I got my first NutriBullet, it was like, it was super simple and it made it good. So
what a great project that's been, the NutriBullet, and I just love everybody who's been involved in it and all my great friends, and it's just been a wonderful part of my life. And there's been many great moments in my life, evolutions, and one of them was the NutriBullet. It just was so fun to go on TV and be there, talking about my favorite stuff. Oh, here's an avocado. Here's how you cut an avocado. Here's how you take the pit out. Here's how you take a lemon and you if you don't have a citrus juicer, here's how you can use a knife, but be careful. And just doing that stuff was so fun. And I'll probably do that again. But there's these different evolutions, right, in your life, your 20s and your 30s and your Jupiter returns and your Saturn returns and your the journey of Mercury and, just all these different parts of your life and, the retrogrades. And, when I look back, more and more and more, it's what's really brought me here to you is that it's really all astrological. It's all in the stars. It's all in the planets. It's all in the movements of the heavens. It's all in the luminaries. And so that's one of the things that I've really just evolved into, is just going, oh, this is what happens when Uranus is in Taurus. Oh, okay, got it. Oh, here's what happens when Jupiter squares Uranus. Okay. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Kind of, and that's why, like, Ann, she's a history professor, and so it's all we get the history to look back on these transits, and that's why having Ann on High Vibe here, and she has so much history knowledge, and then having Erika, and she's doing a school right now about not only just astrology, but bridging that with, we'll go into it, but you're going into the different mythology elements and the mystical stuff.
So it is a divine feminine mystery school. So I am blending mythology, live channeling, astrology, divine feminine wisdom teachings, kind of all together. And it's an 8-week journey and something that I'm just so passionate about.
And then, Anne and you both do Herstory, and you guys have both been, you ladies have both been bridging history and different really powerful feminine energy that has been through the world, whether it is archetypical to actual historical people. How's that been going for you all?
It's been great. I've loved being here. I mean, after we did our first show, History in the Stars, right? Which we're going to bring back.
I know, we were just talking about King James.
But it's really fun to, I'm the kind of outsider on this panel. As
No,
I've been
you're
sitting
not.
here
There's no
listening,
outsiders.
I'm like, ooh, I don't know about all the things that you're pulling out, your crystals and all this, right? I know about the NutriBullet. But I love looking at history from a different perspective.
Right.
And thinking about what can we learn from astrology when we look at history from that perspective. And my history, the history I focus on primarily is 17th and 18th centuries. And that's a time when people, and 16th century, people really still looked at astrology, right? So astrology was part of their worldview, even though they were becoming modern. Like, we look back on that time and we think, oh, the scientific revolution started. But most people don't think, that like Isaac Newton was also an alchemist.
Right.
And so.
And very astrological.
Yeah.
I went back, his book, you're probably familiar with this book, is The Chronology of the Ancient Kings or something. It's his book about the history of when did this biblical event happen and when did this event happen?
Yeah.
And it was all rushed way more closely to present time is what his conclusion was. I'd love for you to comment on that. I thought that was fascinating. He was going by the stars. He was saying, hey, in the Bible it says when this thing happened.
Yeah.
Well, have you noticed, and this will bridge that with what David's asking, Anne, is have you noticed everybody's been citing the Bible more in the last couple years, especially 2020 or Revelations, or it's been very deep. So I'm wondering, especially we're replaying the astrology of those times. It's kind of interesting.
It is interesting. I mean, so the astrology would be the same as like mid to late.
Well, I mean, we had
17th.
Saturn, Pluto, which was 15, 17, and 18. But then, if you really start going into, especially let's say the 1600s, what I've noticed is really interesting right now is one, we had the Mayflower 400-year anniversary. We're seeing the astronomy community and everything about astronomy is changing from the understanding of our galaxy right now. That's going through a lot, and that's what's crazy is the media doesn't even talk about it.
Yeah.
One, that all of the galaxies actually connects. There's no dark matter between them. That we're actually a lot closer to the galactic center of the galaxy itself than this little cousin, weird little, person we don't talk to, solar system anymore. And all the magnetic shifts that we're seeing on the planets are connected to the sun, and then that's connected to the galactic actual magnetic shifts.
Right.
But that's a similar thing is let's take the pandemic, for example, right? How the science just doesn't want to look at the divinity or why is this happening from a deeper space, where that was the conflict of interest in the 1600s. And there's a lot of transits that deal with a lot of Uranian elements, but they didn't know about Uranus. But then we did specials like showing Robert Flood and so much of these great alchemists that did know about these outer realms. And so it's really weird where it's people right now know about these outer realm stuff, but mainstream media or mainstream science doesn't want to look at it. They haven't seen it yet or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many parallels in what both of you just said. But for Isaac Newton, right, he was kind of bringing the new perspective. He was the one who was getting people to think mathematically about what he observed, and then kind of trying to get people to apply that to the world that they lived in, but in a way that people couldn't quite wrap their minds around it yet. So he did actually use the Bible, but then applied his calculus to it to try to calculate, for example, when the end of the world would be, or when particular events would happen, or even also in doing alchemical work, right? He wrote much more on the Bible than he wrote about math, right? So,
right. That's so interesting.
I mean, and people don't think about that.
Yeah, he was a biblical scholar. The way he knew the dates in the Bible was just... I read that book. You can just download it for free on the internet as a PDF. And I was going through and I was just... I mean, Sir Isaac Newton is one of the most amazing people of all history that we know of, right?
Yeah.
What he left behind. I'd love for you to keep going on, what is the breadth of Sir Isaac Newton's work? Because I've read that like at least a third of his work was alchemy, at least. Maybe it was even half, or do you know? It was a lot.
I don't know exactly how much was alchemy, because for so long it was being hidden, because that wasn't considered to be the appropriate thing. And it was in the 20th century that John Maynard Keynes purchased his collection, and a lot of these works came out that people hadn't really studied. So there are new works that look at that aspect of what he did. But I mean, an alchemist during his time was really a chemist, right? So he's such an interesting character. I don't even, like, he's one of my favorite people, which David probably knows.
What was his? What's his astrology? Do you know off? Anybody you know off?
I've never looked at it, but you look at Ann knows.
Oh, right. I know. He was born on Christmas, I think. So he's a Capricorn. Even that he was born when they were still on the Julian calendar, so we would put it ahead 11 days. So yeah, he's definitely a Capricorn.
Okay,
I know that much, but I don't know the rest of his chart.
He just had such an interesting history. The way that the Queen put him on to identifying counterfeiters. Yeah,
that's the end of his life, right? So he was an outcast in his community because he just was so introverted. And, when I teach about him, a lot of students who are scientists now, who take these classes on history of science, identify with him because a lot of people sort of felt like outcasts themselves. But he was the type of person who just enjoyed doing math for fun. So when he went to university, he wasn't from a wealthy family, so he kind of had to go on a scholarship, and he wouldn't have been as integrated with other people. He was already an outsider because of his economic situation, and then he was there at a time when people were a little bit more morally wild, right? It was a period of time where morals were relaxing, but he had like this old school value system and wouldn't really go out with his friends. So he stayed in his room.
He was a full moon in Cancer.
Full moon, huh?
He liked being in his little nest doing
his
big work.
He was in his
But he was,
nest.
what's interesting? So we had that big Jupiter-Saturn, the grand conjunction. That's so funny that the media covered it and then acted as if like, oh yeah, it's been since 800 years that it could have been like this, but move on. Like, finally, the whole world is focusing on astrology for once in their life and utilizing history of 800 years and going, I'm wondering if people that don't follow astrology go, is that why all this crazy stuff is going on right now? Like, you know what I mean? Like, like, oh, it just is this random event. But he was born with Jupiter, Saturn in conjunct. So he would have been born during one of those conjunctions that we saw.
You know what's so funny? At the beginning of this, at the beginning of the pandemic, all of a sudden I saw all this stuff on Isaac Newton in the newspapers. I don't know if any of you saw. Like, there were all these stories on Isaac Newton because he was sent home in the 1660s during the plague. He was sent home from university because they had an outbreak of the plague. He went home, and that's when the apple supposedly fell, and he had his big inspiration about gravity.
Yeah.
And so everybody was saying at the beginning of the pandemic,
it was an avocado, but
an avocado.
He had to be correct.
That's right. It was an avocado. But that's why everybody was like, "Oh, look at what you can achieve when you have to stay home." Then they backed off of that, at least at the academic setting, and said, "No, don't stress out. You don't have to achieve that." So, but yeah, it was the pandemic of his time. That caused him to really be able to have time to focus and develop calculus. But he was such an introvert.
Right.
I mean, he was also like an INTP when you look at Myers-Briggs.
Is it true that he wrote in ciphers? Like, didn't he write everything like Da Vinci? Da Vinci wrote things backwards, and I think Isaac Newton wrote in cryptic words, right?
Yeah.
He had things backwards or upside down or in strange orders or pig
Yeah.
Latin or something.
He had a lot of code.
A lot of
words.
people in that, especially that 17th century, those 1600s, alchemists, that was like, that's kind of what formed like the Rosicrucians or the Golden Dawn movement, which moved into Freemasonry, like because they had to keep a bunch of things secret because the church, right? And that's why the Mayflower left in 1620, right? Because it was like they had to go like basically just practice their religion in secret, and then they left. But a lot of people didn't get on and leave right away. They were born into that, and it's not like it was pretty easy to just get on a Mayflower and peace out. So a lot of people then had to kind of deal with it and just live in secret, and that created a secret energy and a secret world that,
Yeah,
you know.
and like Isaac Newton himself had to live secretly as a Unitarian because he didn't believe in the Trinity. And if he would have let that be known, he could have never been the master of the mint, which he did at the end of his life. And he was knighted at the end of his life. It was like he was finally accepted because he had a breakdown at a certain point. He got so worried about presenting his work publicly, and he was accused of having ripped it off from somebody else. And it destroyed him. He had this breakdown and started calling people names and writing letters to people, and then
Quite a character,
yeah.
right? Like just so much stuff
Yeah.
that he did in his life, good and bad. You
Yeah.
know, he was really like the counterfeiters really hated him
I know.
because he put them away, and he actually, I think, he caused at least one of them to be executed.
Yeah.
So
he
they,
did.
you know, so he was really hated by them. But then on the other hand, you know, so many people, like all the science students today, are so inspired by Sir Isaac Newton,
Yeah.
right? And then just yesterday, I was reading with all the political stuff going on. Everyone's writing, you know what Sir Isaac Newton's, I think it was his third law, which is for every action, there is an equal and
Yeah.
opposite reaction. That just surfaced in the media headlines yesterday. It's just amazing how the stuff keeps coming back up.
Yeah. Yep. I mean,
And that's what's kind of an interesting time to talk about a lot of this stuff, because there's so many prophecies or providences of things that are all coming in unique form. And one thing that I know that you and I were talking earlier, David, about was just even like in the Mormon religion, their prophecies. And
I should pull that up. I've got that right here. This is a friend of mine is a Mormon. He sends me all this stuff, you know, all the latest and greatest from the Mormon Church, things that have been said. Let's see if I can find it.
well, it's
here.
kind of interesting, and to bridge Erika into this right now, it's like, because she's been focusing so much on the feminine form, which I think is so needed right now, because I think when we get to a lot of these kind of prophecy moments in our history, it's been very masculine, and then it kind of gets a little bit hairy, where it's like, if you notice again, I know that they've made Kamala Harris, is it Kamala? It's Kamala Harris, the vice president-elect at this moment, but she hasn't stepped down from being a senator yet, or you don't hear much from her. It's like, and it's like a very, really weird moment here where it's, again, it's all these masculine energies trying to say what's right and what's wrong, and there's just a lot of masculine energy, and I'm just wondering, as all the work you're doing right now, Erika, if there would be some sort of archetype or some sort of feminine form that would be useful for people to be helped through this moment in time.
You know, it's interesting. I really do feel with this shift, especially with the Great Conjunction moving into Aquarius, it was very clear that divine feminine energy is so needed, that this is going to help us come back to our hearts. It's going to help us reintegrate this missing piece of the puzzle that has really been forgotten and oppressed and buried and burned out of much of history for thousands of years. So I really do feel a resurgence of this. We were just talking about this today, that it is now January 12th, 1 year to the exact date from the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that really, as astrologers, you know, ignited everything, this planetary reset and rebirth and reboot that we've all been experiencing. But there's been this square to Aries that whole year, and then Mars retrograded over Eris. And Eris, as an expression of the feminine energy, is really an activist, an awakener. She is a crusader of truth, really getting to some of the deep, dark, sometimes very dark truths, and reaching to the deepest depths and bringing it into light to help heal from it and integrate it and transcend it. And we've been seeing this a lot, as much as there's been so much censorship going on and specific narratives that have been forced. There's just been this mass awakening and a mass remembrance, and as light workers and light leaders and healers, and starseeds, because y'all know I love supporting my starseeds, we've been waking up and reuniting and reconnecting to support one another so we can really step up, show up, align with the mission, because really that's what it's about. It's about really fully embracing our mission now so we can show up and share our gifts and be of service.
Yeah, I feel like it's like the feminine, believe it or not, brings a much more deeper truth to the matter, to where instead of going into kind of the masculine, like, I gotta prove it in kind of this weird kind of way, and also only prove it to certain people at certain points, and then kind of, no, I gotta prove it to this group in a certain way. It's like the masculine tends to kind of be like, oh no, I'm good on every side, I'm trying to make every side okay, where the feminine is just like, no. You know, Eris is very like, no, this is what the stuff is. And I feel like that's been the problem with the government right now. It's just like, just two crying babies, like just yelling at each other nonstop and trying to prove to each other. And I feel like it's a very intense moment for us to really realize and go, this Eris, because it is square this new moon, which is really interesting. And Saturn, Pluto did square Eris, and now Pluto's finished the square to Eris. And so something here is about to be popped up with this new moon here. This is a deeper than a zit, deeper than trying to get feminine here, like, you know what I mean, like a blackhead that, you know, is like, you know,
it's secrets, big secrets are being revealed, and also people, they're not giving the collective enough credit, because I really feel like people know what's going on and they're not being fooled by it. They're not under the spell anymore. There's been a lot of spells that have been going on this whole year, and we all know it. It's time to dispel the spell. It's time to just not buy into that narrative anymore and really rise into our sovereign truth.
When I think this also, and this is for David, because I think you bring up a good point about just nobody's falling for it. It must be frustrating for you, dude, been doing this work of helping people heal their lives through the most basic and beautiful thing that we have in our life, which is just the beautiful food. Like, what you just gave me that was just from some random organic ranch was one of the best tasting things I've eaten in like a long time. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, if you get him coming around, it's like it's like crazy, because it's like, even just with what's happening with stores, what's happening with like the foods that's going around right now, and how they're saying like, oh, there's gonna be food shortages and all this stuff, but the way that this pandemic's going and how they're telling people we're gonna get rid of it in the life, and nothing's being talked about food. Nothing's being talked about the health at all. It must be frustrating for you to just be like, gosh.
It's a trip. I mean, I would say I'm frustrated because I've been at this a long time. So if I was emotionally attached to an outcome, right, you know, because I've done so many live events like you, where if I'm emotionally attached to the outcome of the event at that night or whatever, I'd be a wreck. So I at some point you just go out and you do what you got to do, and you're detached from it. And that's how I deal with it. But it's so much fun, right? And so what I'm trying to do is just like bring people into like look at this beautiful avocado right here. Why don't we grab that? Can you grab that one, Erica? So you can get that one. The one in the front.
By the way, Erica loves avocados.
Yes.
I do love
Thank you for grabbing my avocado, Erica.
Well, because actually, you both are from New York, New Jersey area, right?
Ooh,
so
where?
But
I'm a Long Islander.
Oh, okay. So I'm from Jersey Shore. I'm actually from the town where the Jersey Shore TV show is from.
No way.
Like in the beginning of the second season, when they'd come in from a helicopter like at night and stuff, you could see my dad's office.
No way.
Yeah. And we were right across the road from the boardwalk, basically. And so, but we were there first. So all those people who were in it, I was actually older, probably 10 years, I guess, than those guys. And right about 1980, we traveled all the world when I was a kid growing up. So we always were traveling, went to California a lot, went to Missouri a lot, went to Massachusetts, Illinois, all over the place. When I was a kid, right around 1980, my parents kind of saw bad things coming to the Jersey Shore. Probably happened in Long Island too. And so my parents were like, we're going to California. And that's how I ended up in Southern California permanently, although we'd been coming out for a while before that. And I planted my first avocado tree in 1978.
Wow.
In eastern San Diego, right near the border.
What trips me out about this connection with you two and avocados is when I first met Erika on the reality show, and she was from New York, but then she came like 8 months later after we filmed for all the red carpet events and stuff. The one thing that she was obsessed with is because there's not a lot of avocados in New York, so it's like a seasonal thing, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
The real good ones don't make it all the way there, or like it's like the pasty, like guac, like it's like not even real guac. You know what I'm talking about? Like that weird.
It's like sourish.
So she's like, avocado, please, avocado, please. We would all be out as all of us, all the people that were on the show, all of us, and everywhere, avocado, 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 avocado. She was like, that was like, I'm not even joking, like the obsession.
So
with avocado.
You were still living in New York at that time.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're kind of a new transplant out here.
It's been 10 years.
10 years. Okay,
10
okay.
years, 10 years.
So yeah, you guys were in that show. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that was the one thing though that was like, oh my God, I love avocados and they're abundant here and they're all year round and they're so good and they're actually fully real and just
Avocado on everything.
It's it's kind of a replacement for meat. It's a replacement for cheese. It's a replacement for anything where you're like, I don't want those calories, but I'd rather have something healthy.
Yeah.
It's a replacement for something that's ketogenic, right? Because it's fat. So it's like, well, I don't want sugar, but then, like, what am I going to make, a protein shake? But you're just like, oh, there's an avocado right there. I'll just have a slice of avocado. Yeah. So it's almost like the perfect thing. It just arrived at the perfect time for all of us, right? In our lives. And so I kind of, my friend says this about me. He's like, every time I think about an avocado, I think about you. And he's like, you're like sun-kissed. Like, you're like that orange. You always think about the orange, right? And so I was always like, yeah.
It's funny, you're in Orange County right now.
So I've been kind of targeting that in there, right? Like, I am an avocado grower. I've been growing avocados for 42 years, and my avocados are badass. They are badass. And so it's part of my life. It's part of who I am. It's in my genetics. It's like, it's a love. It's a passion. I'm into it like, I used to renegade avocado plantings all over Southern California, people's yards, all over the place. I'd sprout them up, go plant them haphazardly at night. I'm a guerrilla planter too. I was thinking about that. I was with some old friends recently, and I have a foundation that we planted since 2002. We planted over 1 million trees in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, fruit, nut, and medicinal trees. And the guy, my friend Jem, who runs the nonprofit, is just the best ever. And I was thinking, man, Jem, last year when we met for Christmas and New Year's on Hawaii, and we planted 100 trees together, I said, if you weren't doing this for me, I'd have to be still doing it. Like, I'm a renegade planter. One time we were pitting dates, doing a big party in Santa Monica, and my friend Giuliano and I. And that night, like 3 a.m, we went up into Beverly Hills. I was staying at some producer's house or he's a big guy. It was just a friend of mine who was living there. And he's like, let's go down in the canyon and plant these. So we went down in some canyon behind Beverly Hills and just like date pits. Boom. Okay. Another 10 feet, another one, another 10 feet, another one for like, I don't know, 2 hours in the middle of the night with flashlights. That's the kind of person I am.
So how did that make you feel after
the best ever. I'm still thinking about it. I love it.
That's awesome.
I'm a renegade planter, and I just, there's something, even when I was a little kid, like spiritually, you want to ask me like, well, how I am spiritually. I had never actually told anybody this until a couple years ago. It's just part of, like it's in me. But one day it actually came out. When I was like 5 years old, I used to go around my neighborhood in Seaside Heights, New Jersey, Seaside Park, and I would renegade plant pine trees, baby pine trees.
Wow.
Yep. And one day I realized, I never actually have told anybody that. Not even my brothers knew that. Nobody knew that.
That was just something you were just having fun doing and being a little Leo that was living in your heart.
Yeah.
Because really, I think spirituality to a Leo is
That's
just the things you love, and that's what connects you. And just,
Yeah.
it's always the weirdest routes, but it's not weird at all. It's always like, yeah, I don't know. I was just doing this basic thing that I found fun. And then the universe spoke. Bang.
And it's super spiritually fulfilling.
Yeah.
Like for me, planting trees is just, it's like, it can't get any better. It really, it's like
That's
that.
amazing.
Yeah, that's how I feel about
Because
it.
a lot of people talk about it too in government, especially lately. Like, we're going to get this much money allotted and we're going to go plant a bunch of trees. But then they like, where'd the money go? Where'd the trees go?
I suspect.
Like, and that's the problem though, like, is because I think it takes people with passion to do things in life. And I think that's where the world's changing, is like, it's not just about putting the money and just having people go do it because they just want to make money to do something anymore. It's like, there's got to be truth and love and passion about what you do to even manifest and create the good things in life for it to flow.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing so many things of where it's just damming up and the dams have broke,
Yeah.
And these dams have broken. And damming rivers and lakes and all that stuff anyways is such an old theme. It's not like they just go, we're going to go build a dam anymore. They don't do that.
I feel like what's happening right now is that because they're just, there's so many parasites in the system if you're not in your heart. Right? Like if I'm just working for money, just to make money or to go buy a mansion or a yacht or whatever that is, I'm going to get parasitized to death. So it's actually forcing me into my heart. It's forcing me into my right livelihood because it doesn't matter. Right? It's like, okay, so you parasitize the money, great, okay, whatever, but at least I'm putting trees in the ground. At least I'm doing what I love. At least I'm able to go speak about avocados. At least I'm able to have the best day ever. It's, so it's just, I really have, that's how I've felt for many, many years, because I've been through many difficult times in business, as you have been. I've heard you talk about that, where you're up, you're down, you're back, you're forward. But through all that, there was never really a problem, and I always got through it because it was never about the money. It was always, it's a Leo thing, right? It's always about the mission, and it's, if you're staying that, as long as those trees were going in the ground, as long as that message was going out, it's all good.
And it always works out.
Always works out.
Every time.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, and I hate to keep bridging this weird energy that's come across this world, because even though it's beautiful, it of course has that weird other side. I'm hermetic, so I'm going to look at both sides of everything. But I think it's been coming down to, and there's just so many simple solutions, and it comes to these very basic things to get through all these things that seem like major problems right now, which are really not. I mean, it's becoming where too much thought is coming into things, or too much belief, or too much just not action upon anything, or doing simple things in life. It's like getting too complicated. You got to be away this far by that, and have this on, and this thing, and have this thing, and have this document, and have this, and but nothing's changing. So it's like, obviously we need to start looking at other alternatives here, because I think it's funny. And I think that when, especially probably for you, it's always funny because they always call it like alternative medicine or alternative this, when it's like, is that really the alternative? Isn't that the main thing that's been going on, especially since you're a history professor? It's not like the food changed until in the last 100 years. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's actually more like 70 years. I mean, it's like we've been going in this new system of how we eat. Just like how we've been going through the new system of having a bathroom to go take a shit in. Like, that's a new thing. People don't realize that for thousands of years, you went and dug a hole.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just being real.
Or
like,
outhouse,
like
right?
people are freaked out about it. Like, oh my gosh, you want me to go pee outside right now? It's like, yeah, we're hiking. We're on the trail. Go pee. And people, oh my God, I need a bathroom with water, and I need to see the water go down the thing. It's like, oh my gosh.
That you brought up a really interesting thing that I saw one time at Machu Picchu. It really changed my life. Very interesting thing. We get all the way to the top of Huayna Picchu. Have you guys ever been to Machu Picchu?
I have.
Oh, you have. Have you been there?
I'm not. No.
Okay, not our history professor. Okay, so it's kind of a saddle, right? Machu Picchu is kind of a saddle. So you come in on one side and you go through the park, and then there's this other side, which is Huayna Picchu, which is kind of like a cone point, which is really the spot. And you have to, in advance get a pass to go through to that side. They only let 200 or 400 people in there every day or whatever. So you take your group in there. You got to get there early. And we get all the way up there, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, I gotta go.
It happened.
It happens, right? It's like, because we're up at 4 in the morning. Though. Yeah, it's a good thing. You're up at 4 in the morning.
If you're not going a lot, that's a problem.
That's a bad thing. I actually think that the biggest problem in the world isn't the economy. It's not politics. It's not crime. Those are all symptoms of constipation. I really feel that way, and we can get into that further. But
I would love to. I don't want to get in there, but I want to get in there. Yeah,
the clog, right? Yeah. So I get up there, and I'm thinking, okay, I can't be the first person this has ever happened to ever. There's got to be like a natural bathroom up here that it's got to be here. So I just started wandering around, and back then you could wander around a little bit more. Now they've tightened it up a little bit. So I'm wandering around, I'm going over here, and then I'm going over there, and all of a sudden I find it. It was amazing. It changed my life, actually. They had this spot. So they had this spot where you go down these stairs, and then you kind of come back on that terrace. You come back, and then all of a sudden the cliff is like kind of over you, so no one can see you, and you're kind of slipping down this side of the terrace right on a cliff, and it's deep. It goes far down, but it's not too dangerous. But it's not, there's no guardrail,
right?
And then you come to the spot where, right against the cliff, there's a crack and it's open, and maybe it's like kind of an I shape, right, where it's kind of like that, but it's maybe at the width, maybe it's a foot. And it comes to this, and then all around that, so all around the floor are smooth river rocks.
Ooh.
So you're basically like leaning back against the cliff. There's the hole underneath you. Your feet are in the river rocks.
Weird. That's cool. Yeah.
You see, okay, so then
comfortable.
It was quite comfortable because you're leaning into the whole cliff of the whole thing. And then I was like, what's up with the river rocks? And then all of a sudden I was like, they're smooth. They're absorbent. They're cleaned by the elements when it rains, completely purified. And I got it. And I got the whole thing. And so from then on, I never needed toilet paper.
Right.
Because whenever you have smooth river rocks, that's what you use. And it's much cleaner, definitely much more hygienic than toilet paper.
Of course.
And it feels right. And it just up there at the top of Huayna Picchu in the middle of Peru, all that happened. Life-changing stuff. So you reminded me of that when you said that.
Well, I think it's funny that you even brought up toilet paper, because the one thing of 2020 that people freaked out about was fucking toilet paper. Yeah. I'm like, I have a bunch of old shirts that I don't give a fuck about, that if it came down to that, I'd do that and throw it in the wash. Like, come on, people. Like, it was like the freak out of these things.
It's crazy.
Have been crazy.
I know.
Or it reminds me, there was an old movie called Demolition Man with the three seashells, when Sylvester Stallone goes in the future and he's like, oh, what is the three seashells? There's no toilet paper. You know what to do.
What you said was really interesting. It's like people don't know what to do when there's no toilet.
I know.
And no toilet paper, and like when the thing's not flushing down, like what? An outhouse? I can't do this.
Or just nature, which I call it the one cheek on the one. Like, I find a rock and I just one cheek it, because it's like sitting down.
I haven't heard that term before. That was my first experience with one cheek.
We took a moment. We were trying to picture it.
We're like, okay, the one cheek.
Yeah, because like you can sit down, but I don't know if I'd want to sit down with both cheeks. That wouldn't end up too well.
That's not going to end up too well.
Yeah. But one cheek on the side, just make sure it's a desert thing. Make sure that the rattlesnakes, like for me, I thought I was all good. It was comfortable. I was having a moment like you with these beautiful rocks, and I was like, oh, this is great. I'm comfortable. It was like 90 degrees. It was like 8 a.m, and I was out there in the Arizona in the desert and Lake Mojave, and I'm just like, and then I had no pants on, of course, and there's a rattlesnake right there, and I ran into the freaking lake, right? And then, of course, my brother and his friends, we were young, they were like, you left your pants up here. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And they were like, you ain't getting them back. You're going to have to run up naked up across the beach in front of all the people. I'm like, oh, shit.
Pun intended.
So just watch out for those rattlesnakes. But that's what's crazy, is there's all these simple solutions that, especially even the ancients, or just that the universe and God is just an easy flow. And right now, it's so easy to see things that flow. I mean, look at, we're in California, and how many people are just easily flowing, going, I don't feel like I need to be here anymore. I'm going here now. I'm moved out. and it's like not even like a hard thing. There's just people that are just following a flow right now, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. But it's like when there's all these things, and I hate to say it, it's a lot of the government trying to throw out how this is going to be fixed. The government will never fix anything. Ever.
Well, I mean, you're bringing up a very important point that we should talk about, which is, let's say there really is like a really crazy pandemic going on, which there isn't actually. It's not, because there's not enough deaths, right, to really be a pandemic. Right. So it's more of maybe an epidemic or whatever would be the other word.
Yeah.
So can the government actually do anything about it? That's the question that's never asked. No one ever talks about it. And the answer is no. The answer is no. There's nothing can be done about it. You just deal with it and go about your business. Like, is the social distancing really working? Is the mask wearing really working? We're like seeing the same numbers. Is the lockdowns really working? Nope. There's no evidence that any of those things are working. So they can't actually do anything about it. There's nothing that can be done except what has traditionally been done, which is you take your weak and infirm and you tuck them away from it, which is the smart thing to do.
Right.
That's all we can do.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because if you look at a lot, like you look at Mexico, right? They're not doing like testing like America, Britain, Australia, these Western, like really first world countries are just testing like crazy.
Yeah.
So they have all their numbers and their graphs and everything. But then Mexico, there's no laws. Everybody, but you don't see like people freaking out and being like, everybody's like, gone. You know what I mean? So it's like in a bunch of countries too. If you look at it, there's no way for the WHO or anybody to even know what the hell. It's like so crazy. Because there's just no way to know how everything's going, but everybody's hypersensitized in these Western countries about it. The government tells you to go do this and do that, and it's just adding to these numbers that, of course, people look at numbers, but it's like, okay, yeah, there's cases. If we were to just take every time I got this or I got that, which I think personally, from my own view, that getting sick is a natural cleaning out of your toxins of your body naturally.
I agree.
It's not some, I don't know, like thing that's created and then caught and taken in. I feel like it's a different thing. I think that we've been sold the biggest lie for 100+ years. Because if you look at, and I don't know if this is in history, but it's like, it's not like they were talking about, how people were like coughing on each other and getting something. It's not written as much about. It's not. I've done all the research as much as I can. Probably not as much as Anne here, but.
Well, I haven't done research on exactly this, but I mean, I've certainly read a lot about it. And it's funny that you transitioned from talking about bathroom going behaviors of the past to this, because what's so interesting is that we just are in such a completely different perspective now, where we feel, and it's only been like not even 100 years probably where we've been in this mindset. We feel like we should be able to control everything, right?
Yeah.
And, like the other people never thought in the past, we need to be able to control everything that happens, because they couldn't, I guess, scientifically. But when we ever were in periods of time, such as previously in the 20th century, at the middle of the 20th century, we felt like we could control science. And we created an atom bomb, right? And there was a lot of joy and positivity going into World War II about what was going to be the potential of mankind and humankind going forward. And then we kind of learned a lesson like, wait a second, we can't really control everything because we don't know everything about what kind of scientific things we're creating, right? I mean, and so after all of that, the horror of experiencing World War II, I have felt like we are back again at this point of time where we feel again like, well, wait, we ought to be able to control things. Science is something that we all need to invest in, and science is something that is clear cut and we can control things. But at the same time, we don't get
Is that Uranus and Taurus again?
Yeah, exactly. That was when Hitler was injecting bull semen and thought that was really good for him. Like that's when he had his, I forgot the doctor's name, but they were just experimenting.
Mengele, yeah.
Yeah, who was not even really a big doctor, and he just wanted to become a Nazi, and then basically it was kind of like Adolf was like script shopping. You know what I mean? Through doctors, so I found the one that's like, you'll just inject me with whatever. Okay, great. But he also made his call. He had, every morning Hitler used to have, it was called, because I just did a documentary on Discovery Science at the beginning of 2020, and it's not out yet because of this year. And it was about this secret thing that was, it was a secret area that was going to be a Nazi party center in Los Angeles. And all the documents and all the plans got revealed. And there was a bunch of astrology in there and all that stuff. Because he used to have, when he was up in, what was it called? The Berghof, or that place that he lived up in Austria?
The Eagle's Nest.
Yeah.
I don't know what the German is for
He would
it.
have his magic cocktail in the morning that was like a drink that was made. He had an astrologer, and then he had that doctor. And they based everything off that. But they were trying really radical stuff, though, too. Like bull semen, like, because, and it's weird that he's a Taurus too, Adolf Hitler. So it was almost like,
Yeah, what is his sun? What's his sun, moon? I don't know what his.
So he's very unique because he was. You would think it just makes no sense with him. He's a Taurus, but he's got a Libra rising, right? So he's very Venus-y, and he's Sun in the 7th house, but he has Mars and Venus conjunct too as well, and Taurus, and he's very Taurus-y, and. You know, he was into art very deeply, so you know you'd look at that as a very artisty chart. But he had Pluto at the first degree of Gemini, and so when Uranus went into Gemini and hit his Pluto, and he thought he knew everything about astrology, but it's ironic because 1930 Pluto was found, so they weren't integrating that in astrology yet, and they hadn't really figured much out about Pluto yet. In that decade that Pluto was found, and it was Pluto that got his ass, because when in his own Pluto in Gemini, when Uranus went over his Pluto, I think too much of the amphetamine with his Pluto in Gemini lost his mind, right? Like in Uranus on top of his Pluto, just like just and then we watched him fall into decay, into actually like I think he had like Alzheimer's, like basically, or he had Parkinson's.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, like, I mean, you can imagine under the pressure of all the whole thing and with those planetary aspects. Interesting.
But he did have weird, the last Uranus in Taurus was, I mean, think about, it was also the end of, like, Coca-Cola wasn't originally Coca-Cola, it was cocaine, like, you know, it's like that era was kind of having to change.
Caffeine.
Yeah, I know. It changed into caffeine, but it's like crazy that there were so many things that, the tonics too that were out and everything, that was kind of the pre-World War II era, but then they kind of like other things were coming out too, but they knew that they couldn't like get away with certain things, so they were trying alternatives in the most random places that had never been done. And like, you know, like this new thing that's out that's going to go in your arm. No, yeah, we're going to bypass animal trials, or we're going to bypass this and just throw it in your arm now in less than a year. It's pretty wild.
It's wild. So Uranus in Taurus was 1933 to 1941. What do you think, Erika? What is your thoughts on that timing with what's happening today?
I mean, I think that it's just a lot of the revolution, you know. We've seen a lot of change. It's interesting talking about Hitler during that time, him being a Taurus with Pluto on his rising. That was a really interesting point that you brought up, David, about them discovering Pluto in the 30s and him not realizing it, but then studying astrology and having the astrologer there.
I got to, in the show, look at a bunch of the journals and a bunch of stuff about it, and he literally, they had predicted, his astrologer had predicted that FDR would pass in 45. And they thought that would be the big turning point for them in the war.
Interesting.
Right? And he did pass away.
Right.
And then Truman took over. So actually they were like using astrology, and so sure at that point, like that was like, they knew they were going to have that rough 1944, but they knew in 45 there was going to be this moment for them, and his astrologer had predicted that FDR would pass away. And he did, and they thought that would be the turning point, but no, it wasn't. They didn't even make it to that point. It was all pretty much gone at that point, and they were done. But so that's what's interesting is they didn't know about Pluto, and they didn't look at Hitler's Pluto because they didn't know where it was at.
So
right?
Pluto
and they
went
weren't really using outer planets as much.
Yeah.
They're using more old school astrology of just the planets up to Saturn. So it's like they missed, and that's the thing too, is there's so much beyond. And one thing that Ann and I were talking about, we did a show, I think it was I don't know, it was like
Christmas
a month
Eve
ago, or
one,
it was
yeah.
Christmas Eve or something like that. But we were talking about the Black Plague, the first one, and how they didn't know it was fleas for a long time. They didn't know. So the church just said, you're not praying enough, right? Kind of like now, like you're not doing this enough. You're not
you're not social distancing
right,
enough.
Until people finally got over it. Like this isn't the issue. And I feel like even with whatever this thing is, because I don't even want to give it the name, because to me it's a nameless thing. It's a thing, but I don't know what it is. We all don't know. But the history shows that that was the last time we saw Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn. It was 1284, and that brought in the wave of because we really don't. I think history would be really too hard to find the exact year and day that they knew that this thing happened. It could have been slowly going on and people just passing away until finally it reached a peak point.
There's been plagues, like I was just reading the Iliad. I went and back and reread the Iliad. There was a whole plague in that book.
Yeah.
It's been going on.
The Hong Kong flu of the 60s that my mom got killed more people than what we're dealing with now. And they prepared America just like, okay, you're going to get it. Just prepare. That was how they dealt with it.
Well, they basically didn't do anything,
They didn't do
right?
anything. They just said, that okay, you're just going to deal with it.
Yep.
Like, that's truth. That's not bullshit. Like, that's truth. But you know a lot about that Black Plague moment because it's like very weird.
It is weird, and it seems so similar in many ways in the being very sure that they knew what the answer was to cure it, right? And what's funny is that even I know Erika was talking in her class earlier about witches, right? So I was thinking that, well, you might have had people who had some kind of remedies or ideas about cleanliness or ideas about separating from other people that would have seemed to the church to be like, oh,
demonic.
No, that can't possibly be what would help us. And they actually would have been. Right?
That, I mean, even like looking at that organite right there, like, that, look at that David brought. Like, look at this thing. I was expecting like, okay, a piece of organite. Like, look at that.
This is, it's based on this design, the Sensor 5. And a friend of mine, he just has a skill with this. Some people have a skill at certain things. And he has a skill for this. And after he started making his first ones, we just show everyone that. Check that out. That's a power plate, right? So you're going to put your stuff, let's say you have your favorite avocado. You just put it right there on.
There it is.
There's your power plate. And like I have this under my driver's seat, basically. And there's one under the passenger seat. And just it's sending the energy up. But anyway, this kind of idea of all these pyramids in this array was originally developed by a friend of mine, Dr. Patrick Flanagan. And he called this a microwave slot antenna. Wow. So what it's doing is it's taking all of the microwave radiation, that's very little that the human being produces, but it amplifies it and drives off and pushes off the electromagnetic fields we're getting, the types
EMFs and stuff like
types
that,
of high frequency radiation that we're getting from cell phones and radio and Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff. So that's a microwave slot antennas. It's just taking that little tiny bit of that high frequency radiation that a human being produces, which is not very much at all. It's almost undetectable, and amplifies it. And then that's the idea of this. And it came to him in a dream, actually, is in 1973.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's how this is the 5th iteration of that technology.
Wow.
And so we were like, let's just give him a gift from he passed a year and 3 weeks ago, and giving him a gift back for his great inventions. He was an incredible inventor.
It's a beautiful piece, and it looks badass. It's what I'm talking about.
It's like a portal.
Look at that thing! Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? When you look at it from the side, when it's tilted, when it's vertical like that, it looks like a futuristic ancient like city. Like
That's how I look at it, dude.
I when I'm looking at that thing, I'm like, that is so. It's like it's so much more than all the things you said. It goes on and on and on and on and on. If that makes sense.
But I always imagined like I'm some little dude in here walking around some pyramid complex of whatever this thing is.
I'll move there.
Yeah, like, hey, dude, let's flee California and head to this place right here. Let's go.
I mean, I wear some on me all the time. You know, like I mean,
you guys have similar.
Yeah,
I know that is. I mean, it's very weird. It is very weird.
Epic.
So, with the gold.
What I wanted to ask Erika is, and maybe also to our history professor here as well, is the similarities between this World War II cycle and what's going on right now. And maybe Leo King, you might want to chime in on that too. It looks like a similar phenomenon to me. It looks like we're right back in that cycle again. I think a lot of us have had the experience of like, you know, all our lives we're like, how in the world did people fall for the Nazis? Or how in the world did like people allow the Bolshevik Revolution to occur? None of us are wondering that anymore.
I mean, that's Uranus and Taurus. Yeah. Unfortunately, with the mixture of Neptune and Pisces, which that was exactly the same divide we saw in 1856, the election. That was the 4 years that brought us into 1860, which was Lincoln. So we're at the what was called the invisible divide, or the begin. You know, where it started, the divide for the Civil War, mixed with this Uranus and Taurus, which was like Hitler wanted to go. You know, it was tuberculosis. We're going to vaccinate everybody and do vans. They're literally going to go do that. They're talking about bringing vans into towns. And then, like, I've been putting videos up from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang with the lollipop guy. Like, lollipops, kids. Like, you know,
you
when
mean
he has
the
his
kid
little
stealer?
Like, you know, the kid stealer. Remember how he's that little like cart? You know,
yeah.
It's like that's what they're going to do, and they want to like make sure that people know it's okay. And like, you know, and by the way, they're saying it's free. It's not free. We all paid for it.
Right.
Number one. That's the biggest lie going on. But that's the whole thing too, is whether it's Marxism or whether it's, you know, just communism itself, right? We're back into that same thread. But what's weird is America's always been the country that was so against that. And our Congress was always number one. If you just look at even into the 50s, even like take in like if you watch the movie Trumbo, it was all about, right? Like in movies too, making sure that the movies didn't project that out or so forth. Even though it's a free country, like you could have a communist party in America, but like it would have to win, right? But it's almost like, is it being smokescreened? Like Hitler smokescreened his party, and he was able to change the Kaisers to allow less parties to be in the elections in the years prior. And now we're kind of seeing this weird thing where people kind of fall for this Neptunian media thing, propaganda, that everything is all going to be okay and this is the good way to go, when it's not. I mean, there were so many films that the government had to put out to help people make sure they didn't go down that route in the 50s and 60s, because if we would have gone there in the World War II era, we wouldn't all be here right now, like in this way or living this way. So it's like interesting to watch how the government is not talking about that. It's like I'm ashamed upon if you talk about that. Or, I mean, the intel services are telling us that the CCP and I mean, Russia's another one, even though Russia is no longer communist. But there's a lot of this similar stuff. We're dealing with countries that are. And you have to remember, in 33 through 41, you have Italy, Mussolini, you have Hitler, that are all like buddy, and you have Stalin. They're all three, right? And then, but they're like not even talking with the Emperor of Japan much, right?
You're
like, right. There's that whole thing. But then out of nowhere, Hitler turns on Stalin and goes into Russia because he's greedy. And so alliances change. And then you see FDR hanging out with Stalin now. And it's just, it becomes where you can't predict what alliances are alliances anymore. That's one thing about Uranus and Taurus, because everybody's values change. And the hardest part about Uranus and Taurus is the fact that it's at its worst place, because Taurus is fixed earth. It's our fixed values. And one thing about the collective is we're all individual and we're all unique, but you can't slam down somebody else's values on another person and force them to, this is the value system you must have. And that's what causes this craziness, because Uranus and Scorpio is different. When everybody just has a similar passion and they come behind it, they go for it. But when you start throwing out like, this is going to be your passion. You know what I mean? Like, no, it's not. Like, I'm not, what are you talking
Yes, it is.
about? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Then that goes in a bad direction every time. And Taurus is fixed earth. So everybody's fixated in their own ways and being thrown down these areas they don't want to go. And then there's some people like Taurus can rule being fake, right? Like kind of faking it, where Scorpio's not. I don't want to fake it. So then people will fake, you know, just to be part of the, it's like, you know, joining the bandwagon kind of deal, because I don't want to lose this basic value. I'll give up my sovereignty just to keep some basic values. And that's where it's a tough thing, because sovereignty is the ultimate value, not the basic things that people think, you know, and this is where people are starting to realize what is it that really is a value in life, and it's Uranus and Taurus. Freedom. I mean, that's the freedom, and that's what the spiritual community is about. We don't care what religion you are. We don't care how you practice. We don't care what you want to do. What anything. We're just like, yeah, be who you are, and that's what spirituality is. In essence, is just be who you are, and be that greatness that you are, and thrive in that. However you thrive. And there's a bunch of people out there that are there to show the way in whatever inspirational way that path is for you to get there. If it's planting pine trees when you're 5, that's the way, you know, for that person. But you can't throw that down everybody, right?
Right,
Like,
exactly. I mean, that's the best day ever mentality, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? The best day ever is unique to the person.
Exactly.
You figure out what that means, or the higher power creates that for you that's unique to you.
Yeah, but it also then creates where people who do have the same values, and they all come together against other people that have opposing values. Like, no, we have a different value. And that's the Neptunian thing too. And a lot of it is meant with, I mean, look at social media and look at all the stuff. It was also the weird technology front, right? Because that was World War II was the first war to where this is before, let's use the term weapons of mass destruction, but they were. Those tanks, those big caliber machine guns and the Luftwaffe, right? That Hitler wasn't even allowed to have that based off what the World War I, clauses were. Like, Germany was not allowed to go build that big of an army ever again. They were only allowed to have 100,000 troops. He just went and did it anyway. And then he built the Luftwaffe and just showed it off. And that was the first time we saw those kind of planes, those kind of energies, and that's the technology thing that gets a little creepy about Uranus and Taurus too. It's building things of whatever the value is, and Taurus has got greed behind it on the dark side of it. Everything is a dark side, and so it becomes greed. Uranus and Taurus, right? And then look at how money is right now. Like, just keep printing the money, just keep printing the money. And then that's what FDR was dealing with before World War II, was trying to do, new programs and figure out what the hell to do with money and how to do it. And that was a crazy time, because that was the real depression was 1933, and so the crash was 29,
right?
But the effects of the crash didn't hit till 33.
Yeah.
When you see pictures of people in Kansas or anywhere, and they're literally, the kids are dirty and they're on the dirt and they're eating at their table their dinner and they barely have enough for dinner. That was literally what. And then we see the soup line thing, but that was of course because the photographers were in the city. It wasn't like photographers were hanging out in the middle of America taking pictures of everybody and what was going on. But when you see those pictures, you see that's really what was going on.
So we've got coming up here in 2025, we've got Neptune moving out of Pisces, and we've got Uranus that summer coming out of Taurus
into Gemini, which for America is when they enter into every biggest war they've ever been to. So Revolutionary War, Uranus and Gemini; Civil War, Uranus and Gemini; World War II, Uranus and Gemini. So
it's not looking good on that front. I mean, everything seems to be building up towards a kind of a World War III kind of scenario. So I wanted to kind of comment on that, especially from a historian perspective. What's your thoughts about that? Because all of us kind of see it, the writing's on the wall. It's right there.
Yeah.
Are we headed that way?
Well, what I think is interesting is that what we're living through right now is the buildup to that big war, right? And but so many people are just like feeling like we're already at the point where the war is breaking out, right? Where we're already wanting to go and fight each other or take it out to the streets or to the Capitol building or wherever we're going. But we're really seeing that long, slow process of people being turned against each other and the sides taking shape. Yeah. And one thing I've thought is so interesting about this whole experience is, because you had mentioned this idea of, we always wondered how in the world could Hitler have taken power, right? And I always have thought, people are so apt to want to accuse certain politicians of being dictators or like Hitler, right? But Hitler was not Hitler at the beginning, or he never could have taken power, right? We don't understand how slow the process was to turn people to the side of being
a tyrant.
Being a tyrant. How
it was based off the economy. Was the main way he got in. Was that the economy was so bad after World War I, but then the world economy dropped with the Great Crash. And so there were so many people out of jobs, and he was like, the whole Autobahn, that is what Hitler did. And he put everybody onto the Autobahn to build it and to beautify the country and to vaccinate the country.
Oh, yeah. And
there's similar writings on the wall by a certain somebody right now saying the same thing. We got to do all these things that redo the reconstruction of the country and the roads and and everybody get vaccinated. And it's like, and they think it's the other guy, which is like, I'm just sitting there going, I'm looking at history and being an astrologer and being like, the exact programs that are the most important to this new thing are the exact same ones that Hitler was under. And I'm not trying to call him out on that. I'm just trying to say, like, you gotta look at that, and everybody will go after me all the time and be like, oh, that's just because you're on the other side or whatever. It's like, no, I'm looking at fucking what was actually said and what actually the universe did.
And what's being said now. Nietzsche had a great quote. I keep coming back to it, which is, historically, only the truth has been censored. That I keep coming back to that. There's certain things that keep coming back, over the years, and that one I keep going, whoa.
Yeah, and the only way you can move the old power out of the way is to demonize it too. You make everybody think there's something really wrong with that person or these people. Move them out of the way.
Yep.
And that's what he did with the Kaisers.
Yeah,
right, because they were like the old guard, and that they had lost the war. They were the losers of World War I. They made us look so bad. They made us look bad. Look at the way they make us look.
Right, and that
it was more about the way we look
right?
as a country. Like look at our pride is being taken away. Like we are being looked at as like the bad people.
I just heard people telling me that about what we look like in the world right now.
That's what I'm trying to, You're catching my drift.
I know. But, and the other thing that's really interesting is in the 30s, there were also big health movements around the world, kind of happening at the same period of time. But then there was this real push for states to modernize, and so to turn to technology and science instead, and that's what
I'm so glad you brought that up. That's been on my mind today.
Right,
I know it's bridging what you were bringing up earlier to me before this combo.
There was a tremendous movement in California of the Back to the Land movement that led right up to the Second World War, and the Second World War deleted it because everyone went off to war, and the families were changed, and their positions of where kids grew up and all, it was all changed. Everything got shuffled, and right at 2020, I was like, oh, this is all like so many of our favorite little vegan or raw food restaurants are gone, wiped out. It's the whole health movement is kind of like been dispersed. What's going on with health food stores like a Whole Foods? That's owned by Amazon now. It's turning into technocracy. That's not the move. That's not the type of health food stores that I was giving talks in even as recently as 10 years ago. I used to do tours in the Whole Foods all over the country. It was a totally different thing then. It was a completely different mentality. So I can see that this is actually a great reset of our health food movement in a massive way. We will come out the other side of this, and it'll be just like what happened after the Second World War. It'll start all over again, and we'll have to rebuild it all over again and start the whole thing back from scratch. Which is, I'm not saying that that's bad. That's not necessarily necessarily a bad thing, but it's kind of, I see now and I feel like, oh, the Richters who had that wonderful raw food restaurant on 3rd Street in Olive in downtown Los Angeles that they had for 19 years at least before the Second World War. I can completely see what happened to them now. I completely see what happened to their whole movement and how it all changed and basically came apart as a result of that conflict and, of the astrological influences. And we're going through it again.
The other interesting thing if we're going to go back to the bringing on a Hitler was, and ironically, it was so, I guess you could say, hypocritical, since he was using astrology, but he went after all the people that were using any of the occult. Yet he was the master of going after finding things in the occult. I mean, he sent part of his army to Antarctica. He sent a bunch of them to Egypt. He sent it everywhere to find artifacts, to find the secrets. Yet publicly, you can read in all of his documents, he was so against the occult and magic being used, and that normal people were not allowed to do that stuff. And what's interesting is what just happened on the Capitol building with that QAnon shaman guy, right? I already see the setup, right? It's like a setup. Because it's like now everybody that's spiritual is connected to QAnon, right? Everybody. And I've gotten more of that like all your predictions you make, Leo King and everything, it's just because you watch Q. I'm like, I didn't even fucking know Q, like what the fuck that shit was. I never had the time to even look at it. And when anybody tried to show me it, I'm like, it's just a bunch of random fucking like 2 sentences of, I don't even know what the fuck. I'm sorry to say, there's no prediction there. I'm like, let me just go back to my astrology for a second. And that's what's crazy is because like Erika was just telling me, I guess he just got in jail and he's not going to eat until he's waiting for organic food in the jail.
I just found out he's getting organic food just now. They're giving him organic food. Newsweek reported that. I just found that out.
Way.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, so I guess the power of organic food can be done.
It's
in
gotten
jail.
all the way into
But
jail.
If I was in jail right now and I read that article, I'd get everybody in jail. I'd be like, what the fuck? We've been getting fucking bologna sandwiches? Fucking Oscar Mayer, get me the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Like, I need fucking organic. We're all not eating. And then give me that organic food.
They need some avocados.
Totally.
Need some avocados.
There's avocados
Wow,
in
so
jail
he
these
look at
days.
him. He can get demanded for that.
Yeah,
Wow.
and so it's interesting, the whole like Q thing, because everybody goes, you're a QAnon conspiracy theorist. I mean, I'm sure I get that all the time. I'm like, what does that mean? What are you talking
if you
about?
associate with questioning the norm,
Yeah.
you're Q now.
Yeah,
in
somehow.
spirituality.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it's our brothers and sisters in the spiritual community that are coming back in that way too. I'm like, wow. At least that's been for me.
Yeah. I also feel that the word conspiracy, like a conspiracy theorist, that was a term that was created by the CIA in order to make everybody feel like shameful or weird if they're against whatever narrative is being pushed that is for the destructive agenda.
Well, yeah, for when they really throw a real thing in, they can say, oh, no, it's just a conspiracy.
Right, to just kind of
It's
like
the right
villainize
moment
it
to
or
be
just
able
kind of
to
toss it
shit.
away. Yeah, something else that was coming up, like with the historical astrology, and I mean, you've both talked about this and taught about this a lot. Neptune is in the exact same space as it was during the Salem witch trials.
I know.
So we see this where
Right.
it's like, what are you doing? We've had leaders here in California, in New York, saying, oh, like trying to get people to rat out their neighbors. And all of a sudden we're seeing this energy where people are really confused. The media, which is a very Neptunian influence, it's like the weird man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz trying to control the show. Some people see it, some people don't. People don't really know what to think, and the narratives that are being pushed for those that are against the grain are then like demonized, or they're made to feel like they're completely wrong. And it's just like this narrative of like compliance and submission that's been forced. And it's...
Well, that's what's been crazy, right? Because when I did a lot of this work over the last couple of years, and it's been over this last 4 years, and I brought up about in my Age of Deception about Neptune coming to the witch trial spot. And then you start hearing Trump start saying he's on a witch trial. He's on a witch trial. He's on a witch trial. It's like people are just like, you're just saying that because Trump's saying it. It's like, no, sorry. Like, I got the receipts before he was president of like this was going to be coming up in this up into the build up to 2020 and so forth. And so a lot of people out there are really just like, if Trump said it and you happen to say it in some spiritual way that came out, or actually it's the opposite, you say it in a way, then Trump eventually says it, then you're automatically associated with Q now, or you're automatically associated with that. And you can't even there's no, you can't even you don't even get into an argument with them, because it's just like, okay, have fun thinking that. But now it's kind of a scary territory after what happened with the Capitol building, because it's going after large groups of people now in many ways, and an association, and anybody's making the association. Like, you're able to take what was interesting is actually JP Spears, which I love JP, because I always loved JP, but I was always like, okay, he's funny and he does it. But this year, I mean, he brought to light so many things in a comedic form that I think were so important for people to just, even if you don't believe in it or whatever, just take a look at it in this angle. And one of the things he just brought out with is like how, of course, Trump's been banned from Twitter. He's been banned from everything. I mean, even Pinterest banned him.
I was banned from Pinterest.
You were?
For no reason. I've been banned from YouTube, Pinterest. I was banned by WePay.
Anybody speaking health too?
Yeah.
Have you noticed that? The doctors this year that came out that were from Fresno, oh my gosh.
Crazy.
It wasn't Fresno, it was Bakersfield. Those guys were on it and they got banned. And so anybody,
and then that set the stage for those first American doctors.
I know,
remember that
exactly
group?
all that.
And then they got banned.
All that.
Yeah.
And then if you've noticed the suppression of the health movement too, of like nobody is able to talk about health at all. Like, that's not even in the discussion. The media won't even cover it. The media won't even, if the media was the media in real journalism, wouldn't you be going to every place and being like, so what works for helping with this out here and here? No, nothing. Just only what's that. But going back to this notion where I think it's scary is the groups, is like what JP Spears showed just recently, is like he shows the 2 tweets of why Twitter just banned, they were the first ones, right? Like with Facebook, like they banned him forever. And it was in a context, like there was nothing institutive of violence or anything, but it's just like the statement by Twitter is saying that if you look at the state of the world and what's happening, he said these things and you have to take it in this context. So it wasn't actually what was said. It's in the context of whatever Twitter feels, it says. And that's what scares the shit out of me. And I'm not somebody of fear, but it's something to start to think about.
That's the witch hunt stuff.
That's the witch hunt, yeah, right? Like everything's taken out of context now. Right. But Maxine Waters, doing the same thing, but actually not even the same thing. She actually calls for violence. She actually calls people to go rally up and go after, and don't let them do this, and don't let them in your place, and go into their, you know what I mean? Like, she's okay. It's okay for her to do it. And I'm just somebody who's like, I gotta be somebody as a hermetic person and be like, well, if this person did it and that person did it, why can't you? It's not the same context, but it's totally different. Actually, it's like so crazy.
Yeah,
well, there's a double standard going on, isn't there? Yes. And so this is something I've been listening to, like RFK Jr., and what he's been saying. He's awesome.
He came out, this 2020 was just like bang for him.
Yeah. And so, you're reading between the lines between all these pundits out there and all these interesting people, and you're like, yeah, it seems like if you're on the side of the system or the establishment or the CCP or the Democrats or whatever, there's one law that applies to you, but if you're in another narrative, that law, you're under a totally different level of scrutiny, which is what you're pointing out, right? And so I look at that and I go, okay, what are the influences that are creating this? And I think it's definitely the Uranus in Taurus. It's definitely Neptune in Pisces. But what else?
It's the semi-square between them. They're 45 degrees, which is like people can't notice it because a square, you feel the pressure, but it's a hidden element when it's a 45 because it's like they're in signs that like each other. Taurus and Pisces like each other, but they're actually making a 45, which is a semi-square in geometry. So it's like the media against the people, right? And so people, when they think, oh no, it's not. Well, it's like, okay, well that's what it says, or it's the people against the media. It's the same thing that we brought up about Isaac Newton. If there's going to be one way, then it's going to be the other way too, right? So it's the people against the media against the people, and that's what's one weird thing. But the biggest thing would be a year ago today, Saturn, Pluto, the Sun and Mercury all met. And that was the exact moment that Saturn and Pluto were supposed to meet. They hadn't met since 1518. And so it took 502 years for them to come together. And bang, they come, and guess what? They meet with the Sun and Mercury at the same time. And Mercury rules the mind. And so this Saturn-Pluto, that's going to last a long time, because you have to remember that it's the effect of the sign, and Saturn's in its home sign of Capricorn. It's a controlling mind, about controlling the mind now. And when you got Pluto there to take control of it in a deep it's more than just like subconscious. Pluto is like a tick that goes to the root of like the stem of your, what people talk about third eye. It's even more than your third eye. It's like to the root
brain
of the stem. The stem. It would be the reptilian stem of our brains. To take that over too. And this whole year has been about that reptilian kind of fear, right? Like that hits that brain stem. And then that's what connects to the lungs and connects to the nervous system and all that stuff. And that's one of the things that Mercury rules, is the lungs, because it rules Gemini and rules the arms. So it's been interesting to see this pandemic be about people like they're gasping for air, but that's from fear. Fear is, when you're in fear, you're, oh my gosh, like, or when you hear on the phone, like your friend got in a car accident, the first, you start breathing all intense. It's hard to get breath. It's like, sit down for a second, take a break, right? But this is extreme. And when that transit happened, there was a lunar eclipse 2 days before on January 10th in Cancer that exactly opposed it. And that triggered all the events that we're seeing today, but there's a hidden element. There was a hidden element of change that was happening during the last time, 500 years ago, during the Renaissance, which was the end of the Catholic Church control over individual countries with monarchs. Like, that was the beginning, and also losing control of the only narrative of what Christianity was, right? That was Martin Luther. That was then Henry VIII. Just, took a little bit of time, but he was thinking about it already, but it takes a while for him to do it. And then breaks off and create the Church of England. But then now, this is these breakaways from what is that place of control. And it's kind of interesting because, it's like kind of weird. The Vatican is still around, right? But the Vatican's money systems are still rolling, and they're still rolling, and they've had a lot of things they've had to try to clear up. But it was weird to see over these last couple of weeks, to see the Pope just be like mad at people for celebrating Christmas, which is not their number one thing to celebrate, or that everybody must get the what in the arm. Like and that's exactly what happened during the one that was in 1284. It's like, then it was like, you must pray in order to do this, and then that was also the Knights Templar, and we're seeing these kind of like Knights Templar energies where people are coming up, but they tried to eradicate them. That's where we get Friday the 13th from. And even though that was 1307, but you have to start to see that these are waves of vibrations that don't just go away. Like, people think in astrology, okay, it hit, it's over. No, they last and they echo.
Right, and it leads in and goes out. So this brings us up to the next thing that I want to get into with you guys, which is, the prediction for a long time coming. I first became aware of it from Orson Welles' great, I think it was his Nostradamus show that was on HBO in like 1980, where he was talking about the Antichrist, right? And so Rudolf Steiner, who left, remember we were talking about that, he left 1 million pages of material behind his books and lectures. Insane. It's insane. It's unbelievable, actually. That works out to be like over 50 years that you're putting out 70 pages of material every day.
Right.
It's that much stuff. And his take on things over the years, as I've gotten deeper and deeper, I'm a reader. I read a lot of books. I've read thousands of books. And when I got to Rudolf Steiner, I was like, oh, this is something. It was kind of like Sir Isaac Newton. Like, this is one of these little avocadoisms, by the way, that I picked up from reading. It was one of those things. One day I found this in a book, and I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
Which is on that, why did the apple fall from the tree?
Right.
A better question is how did the apple get up there in the first place?
Right.
right? And that was like a Steiner kind of idea. It's like, wait a second. Rudolf Steiner says that in this epoch, right now, in the 21st century, comes the Antichrist. And he had a name for it, which was Ahriman, which is the technocratic deity, the devil, the demon of materialism. Technocratic.
Right.
Technology involved. And all along, since I've read Steiner stuff, I've been watching, I've been going, oh, this technocracy, what's going on over here? Look at the materialism, the material explanations for everything. You had a great point about that of like, what was that point you brought up earlier, which was science is going to figure everything out. We're going to get everything sorted. That's a very materialistic idea that science is going to figure it out. We're figuring everything out. So what I'm sensing, what I've been sensing for years is that Ahriman is coming in and it's disturbing the fields of everything. It's kind of like the solar minimum, right?
Right.
And I think Ahriman would come in at the solar minimum because the sun is like the abode of Jesus and Buddha, according to Steiner. I mean, that's God, right? The sun. And so as that thing goes minimum, Ahriman's like, oh, this is my chance. I'm coming in. And actually,
weeks before the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the grand conjunction of the basically they call that would have been the Star of Bethlehem, which Jesus was born, comes 2 weeks prior or after we have this weird energy come in of what you would talk about. Like, I'll be honest with you. That's what's kind of weird is like, if that's showing up, then that means that the counterpart's showing up, which would have been Jupiter-Saturn. Right.
So something's up. Something is up. Like this whole election process and how the bizarreness of it and everything about it. Everything. None of it is just clean cut and like, oh, yeah, it's just normal. Everything's just great. Look at this. It's like every kind of weird phenomenon.
Right.
This is the coming in of Ahriman, right? And so it's going to start to impress itself on phenomenon around us, planetary interpretations, and my personal feeling is it's going to peak out like for some reason I think it's going to peak out around 2032, 33. So I wanted to ask you guys about that. What's the astrology happening right around that time? And that's when I think it's all going to bubble up to a head, and finally it's going to come to like a cataclysmic conflict of some sort. Maybe we're already in a war before that, maybe not. I don't know, but that's my feeling about it. What are your guys' thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's when you're going to start to see, right before we get into those 2030s, we're going to see some outer planet really awesome aspects. Like we're going to see like Pluto and Neptune, as they're doing their things, but we're going to be seeing like Uranus and Neptune making some good things. We're seeing Jupiter, Neptune 2022, but what it's really bringing us to when we get to those 2030s is we're about to see Saturn really start to show itself going through the personal signs, right? The opposite of what we're at now, because it's a 15-year cycle, right? So we'll be almost there, but it'll be Saturn in these moments of where all these eclipses have been happening during this time. So Saturn will, which actually does rule Satan, the idea of Satan, would be at the positions to where the North Node has been through these times, at that moment. And we're about to go see at the same time, like when Neptune goes into Aries, right, coming in this 2025 and all that, we're going to be starting to see things shifting. And one of the weird things that's beyond a lot of people's thought at this moment is Chiron, which Chiron is so important in astrology. It looks like a key, and it's in Aries. And the last time it was in Aries was in 69 to 70, and that's when it came in. And we just went through that 2019 to 2020. What's really weird is that was, of course, we didn't find Chiron until 1977. So that was Nixon resigning, and that was, that's when people's clothes and the shag carpet came in, and cars started to look weird, and people started to grow their hair long, and everybody, Chiron and Aries is when the identity of things start looking weird, which is what we're seeing right now. Mm-hmm. But with Chiron, that will be coming back into Taurus, because we're going to have Chiron here. That's going to be 2030s. You're going to be seeing Chiron finishing in Taurus around these degrees in which it was found, and really starting to understand what the hell is this all really about, this whole Chiron story, which is the story of the asteroid that looks like a planet, but it's not a planet, and it's in between Uranus and Saturn, the boundary line of what we can see and can't see, which is the typical wound of a human being. You're in a physical reality that you can see, but you still don't understand the physical reality perfectly. But then you see this universe that you contemplate and can understand, but you don't understand it fully. So we're screwed in between both. That's Chiron. And that's the key, is when you learn to go, I'm not screwed, in that I see the connection to both, that I am the connection to understanding both. And having to break that kind of, I'm holding on to this life that I don't see the reality the way I want to, I don't see the universe and understand it. That's this thing that we're all going to have to go through. And also, it was interesting because it was in the 60s when we had the great revolution of like the love movement, and also, I mean, it was crazy wars too, Vietnam and so forth. That was when your Chiron was over with Saturn. And so Chiron heats up when it's by Saturn because it's closer to the sun, and it does a trail of it, the ice that it forms when it's by Uranus. As we come into the 2030s and into the 40s, Chiron's coming towards Uranus right now. If you notice, Chiron's in Aries, Uranus is in Taurus. So now we're seeing the opposite. We've never been conscious of this before. And now we're going to go into the ice realm of where Chiron gets its ice. So the human, and then we're in Aquarius, which is ice. Pluto's coming in 2023 into 2024. And we're in Jupiter, Saturn now. We had Uranus and Neptune in the last 20 years. Like, the Aquarian thing is a real deal, the Aquarian age. And people have to realize it's opposite of Leo. It's not shiny sun. It is cold, and it's connected, but we have to find connection through the cold. It's the middle of winter. That's what Aquarius represents, the middle of winter. And so I don't find it weird when you look at like Game of Thrones and how they brought up the whole like winter's coming, or even Biden said the dark winter, right? Like, it's like none of this stuff is a coincidence, because that's exactly what, ironically, whatever's about to happen here in this Aquarius transit, we're about to see the most planets in Aquarius since 1962. And in 1962, you have a lot of weird elements that are kind of coming back, especially associated with the vax. It's like the year that they were using fetuses from babies and playing with all that stuff. And then this technocratic thing has been going on a while, but it's bridging to a really weird point here where in the 2030s it's going to be like, no, that's not organic. So it's funny because if we talk about organic, the farther we're going away from the organic parts of life, and this might be the big ball buster, I think, for a lot of people, is that the idea that humanity is going to create a technology for us to go beyond our wildest dreams into the universe, or fly to another, planet and live there and all that stuff. That's not what we can't sustain that energy as a consciousness and as the beings that we're here, the way that we're at. It's going to show us that we're meant to be here and embrace here. And what's happening is everybody's going, I don't want to be in this city anymore. I don't want to be in this state. Then it's going to go, I don't want to be in this country. I don't want to be on this earth anymore. And so everybody's going to then be looking over this technocratic society to give the answer. And they're going to promise it, and they're going to promise it, and they're not going to deliver it. That's what's going to happen.
I've been thinking about that thought right there. Maybe we should get some comment on that, because kind of what this is leading to, I mean, I guess this whole war idea or whatever, is going to come, is really about everyone going like, I kind of don't even want to be in a part of the system. And but not just a person. It's like everybody goes, we're out of here. I don't want to pay taxes. Don't want to deal with the system. We want to create a new system. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, especially with Chiron coming into Taurus, although the traditional ruler of Taurus is Venus, I always feel that it's co-ruled by the earth, and I would really channel that as a healing of the earth. Speaking of all that Aquarius energy and kind of like the winter and the coldness, it's interesting because we've been talking about these magnetic poles shifting, and this making a huge impact on our waters. You were just saying this, David, that the whales who have been becoming more beached is because of the magnetic poles shifting. Also, we are actually like closer to the galactic center. So I'm actually looking at that as that's like a beautiful light. That's straight
they thought we were 200 million light years away. Now it's 23 million light years away.
Yeah.
That's a big
Huge.
We're that much closer. That's
That's a
lot.
big factor. Like, that's the thing, though. These numbers are thrown around, light years this, trillions of that.
Right.
You know, it's just, who's to say for sure?
Right. It could be just right here.
Well, with Aquarius energy, it's not linear time anymore. It is quantum, really. And I think with coming back to Chiron, that's going to be moving through Taurus during those years, it's going to be a reconnection. I'm almost seeing a channel, like a new movement to connect with the earth, to connect with the heart of the earth, to connect with like divine natural order of things, coming back to that. And realigning to the rhythm of the earth, the natural cycles, the organic nature of food, the organic nature of all things, because that is the complete opposite of what technology is, which is synthetic, coming back home to the heart, the roots of it, coming back to that natural cycle and divine order, which I think that is where a tremendous amount of healing and peace and harmony, because those are other vibrations of Taurus and Venus, coming back to unity and peace and harmony with
gratefulness of the earth we have, because when that comes in the 30s, it's going to come back to where we found it, and it's going to be so weird because it's going to be in a moment where we realize, one, look at the quad, supercomputer, right, that Google brought out in October of 2019. That's part of your prediction here of this Antichrist thing, because they're using that with all of our data. So why are they storing all of our data? That thing can compute the typical supercomputer, it would be like an old Model T Ford trying to go on a trip across the nation compared to a brand new car, right? But even more better than that, if that makes sense. But that quad computer, instantly, they're taking all the data, every message we've ever had, everything. And imagine this quad computer, and you just tweak it and be like, what causes everybody to break up? And it would tell you what hour, what's the vibe, what were they going through weeks before. It could figure all those things out about our human elements, this crazy AI, crazy shit, and fucking spit out. So everything we're seeing is like a quad computer thing of boom, there you are. That's what will trigger the mass population. Okay, let's do that, because it's almost like the beginning of 2020, or the beginning of 2020 was this whole the Iranian shooting down of a commercial airliner. Now, of course, that was preceded by the assassination of a military head of the Iranian government. But it's almost like people just didn't fall for that. So it's oh wait, what's next? Throw this out there. That's what's kind of crazy, is that system is going to try and figure out another thing, we all don't want to be here, we don't want to deal. But the people have to realize that the collective is embodying whatever we want it to be. And the collective has to realize that Chiron, when it comes into Taurus and it comes back, is going to be you either as Chiron feel wounded, or you accept it and you realize the gratefulness, and you unlock the key to the beautiful humanity that we are, which the humanity and the Earth's relationship has to be healed. And it's going to take that long. But it reminds me too of the weird things that Bill Gates is trying to do with blocking the sun's rays. And that's a real thing. It's actually in motion as we're talking right now.
Absolutely. 100%.
It's been publicly done. And that idea and those kind of things are demonic. That is, that is to try and block the rays of the sun for no actual real scientific proof that's what it is, when actually there's so many scientists coming around and saying that the earth changes right now, and especially the weather patterns and changes, especially looking at all the lightning storms that have been in this year because of this pole reversal on the sun, looking at our pole reversal that looks like it's activating faster, it's getting crazy. 2020 proved, it's going to go down. We got the data that this shit's going down. We've never in 50 years of recording the Earth's rotation have seen 28 glitches. It's called the rotation glitches of 1.5 milliseconds. It's typically one glitch a year. We had 28 this year, 2020.
See what I mean? That's an Ahrimanic thing. that means that something's afoot.
Something's off.
Yeah, there's another force that's coming into play here. It's been coming into play all our lives. It's driven the technocracy. It's driven the technology. Right. So they're just like money. It's like you're not going to keep evil away from money.
Right.
You're not going to keep evil away from technology either. Right. And so Steiner's like, you better pay attention to what's going on with your technology, because evil's going to go, oh, we're going to just take that and this. And that's what we're seeing right now with the technocracy. The technocracy is just totally blindsided everybody.
I know.
We're just like, oh, we're more important than you are, president, or we're more important than anybody. We're more important than the government.
Right. That's literally what they're proving with the levels of censorship that are on the same level as communist China, that they're more influential than the government when they can shut down the president of the United States. It's crazy.
Well, and JP Spears did it really well. So they shut down Parler for saying, and this is what Apple said, and Google, that they are responsible for the content that's on there. Yet Section 230 says that they're not responsible. So Facebook and Twitter can get away with it. They're not responsible for what people say on there, but yet they keep those platforms on. But Parler has to be responsible for it. But
it's just propaganda, isn't it?
So if you applied that same tactic, then right now, Facebook and Twitter should be down, which makes no sense. Or Amazon, right, is saying that, the back to Amazon, you can't do that stuff. It's like, oh, then that means that, what do you cut off all the other servers to everybody else? And that's the thing is it's so much more than just the internet, right? It's nobody really paid attention to the stock market this year, and like watching like big companies like Nvidia and that create graphics cards and stuff buying out huge other big like actual more of the hardware companies that make computer systems and making it completely monopolized. If you tried to build a computer in 2020, good luck, because all the good stuff you had to have gotten in 2019. Like, you couldn't go get the best graphics card. They were sold out. Look at PlayStation 5. Sold out. It was like nobody could get it, right?
Wow.
So it's like right now to get the stuff that you need technologically wise, very difficult. So it's now even more difficult in a physical world, right? Look at Apple, like they couldn't even get all their phones and all their stuff and all the computers out on time and everything, right? So it's becoming where they're going to just start making it like very elite to get it, and then they're suppressing all the ways for people to make money or get money, and only giving you, they make you feel like, okay, well, I can survive off this money if it's a stimulus or something like that. But no, you can't get anything that you would need to do anything that would be revolutionary. Or private money has been taken away out of the markets, venture capital and so forth. Like, you can only go through the SBA, and you have to have been in business, and you have to prove now that you have employees, and and a lot of people aren't in those kind of spaces. So PPP just is like a Band-Aid for people who they just want to kind of keep going, and then they have to pay that debt back anyway. They're saying that you don't, but the second they go in there, you get an automatic IRS audit whenever you want in your bank account, because they hardwire it into there. And if they see that you spent money on a fucking coffee, you are automatically in there, and you're going to get taxed. So people don't realize that there's no more private money.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about astrology and Bitcoin, because we've seen in the last, especially 3 weeks, an explosion in cryptocurrencies,
Which has been awesome.
Hey, it's awesome for me.
Yeah, no, that's what
I'm real happy about it.
Yeah,
but what does it mean? What's
I mean, and that would be the Uranus Taurus thing. Is it reminds me of Schindler's List. Because in Schindler's List, he uses chocolate. He uses these very unique things to get the Nazis' attention so he can get his warehouse. That's DeFi, right? That's not like using like decentralized money, right? Like, it was about trade. And so, but this is a very unique new place that we're going, because it's no way for being regulated. That's the main thing, is regulation. And it is in a way where it is peer-to-peer. It truly is, and it can be traded at any time. But what's interesting about it is it is a way for people to start moving forward and understanding how to finally, create a class system that's for the people, without, if you think that the government's going to go out and just start throwing out $20,000 on every corner,
it ain't happening.
It ain't happening. It will never happen. And the money will be too devalued and the inflation will be too high to ever go anywhere. That Bitcoin is the one thing that is showing people a different route, and it's scary for people to see. But it's one of those things where once you take the leap and then you're in it, then you kind of get it. Because I'll admit, I was very nervous about getting into it when I did and pulled all my stocks out of the stock market. And I was like, whatever, I'm going to do this, because the astrology said finally 2020 was the year where it was going to be that breakthrough, which I think Jupiter and Saturn, if it's for the people, even with Saturn there, it's about restructuring in a positive way. But you have to re-innovate. You got to try new things, and you got to do things that are innovative and with the times. And this is a time in where, yes, it might not have the physical element that we're used to, but it is in many ways of where we're at in society today. And if you look at the past, especially like in Rome, right? Like they got to put, I think it's so funny that they use Bitcoin, where it's like the bit, of course, of the actual the bit of a computer term. Mm-hmm. But they used to have to break off coins back in the Roman days because they ran out of gold, right? Exactly.
Yeah, like in America, they would take, because they had the big silver. It was a peso. What was it? That was their silver. It was an ounce of silver, right. And they take a piece of 8 and they cut it into 8 pieces, like little pie pieces.
And that's what Bitcoin is in a digital form.
Yep.
But it's interesting that it's completely. It's not dealing with the federal banking systems across the world banks.
Right.
And that's what's tripping out the system. We lost $200 billion in the market yesterday, but it just had reached $1 trillion for the first time. But now it's bigger than, it's almost as big, Apple's $2 trillion, so it's almost going to be bigger than Apple. And that's people. It's people. It's nothing to do with governments. It's people. Bitcoin is people. Mm-hmm.
So is this like, to me, when I look at the cryptocurrencies, I'm going, this is like a fail-safe mechanism that arises when there's too much technocracy, too much control. They're about to drill down and track your every move. They've got you on every which way but Tuesday on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Google, right? It's like all of a sudden these things pop up that are fail-safe mechanisms that empower people that are outside the control of the centralized governments and the CCP and the United States and whoever. So the question then becomes, where is this going? So I've been looking at it, and on the logarithmic scale, Bitcoin is set to hit 100,000 within a year. It's going to hit $100,000, and then it will go to $1 million within 4 years after that, based on what's been happening historically over the last 10 years.
There's only a certain amount of supply,
Right.
And that's the problem with the Fed is there's no.
It's not printing.
And really, what is that money
it's
printed
the problem
for?
with fiat currency,
More, more systems that do harm to the planet or do harm to the world. Whereas like peace is really what Bitcoin brings, because it's like you can't go any farther than that. Like, or you could just keep buying bits and bits and bits, but it's going to be worth more and more and more because of that.
Right.
People are going to be like, oh,
yep.
So if you don't have a whole coin, right, and even though you have a bit, right, like it's like, okay, I got a bit and it's worth some money, but people that they want to get in, it's like, like, okay, they can break up a bit, but there's only so much supply though, and demand gets higher.
Yep.
And that's what we're seeing also in the housing market at the moment right now, right? The demand is high and the supply is low. Nobody's wanting to sell. Everybody's like, especially cities are being flocked out of. It's 35% decrease in rent and in home sales in San Francisco. Remember, just if you were to tell me that 2 years ago, right, when everybody was like, San Francisco is the most expensive place in the world to live. Not anymore. Not anymore.
Everyone evacuated.
I know.
So this goes back to what you were saying about, and this would be an interesting thing for you to chime in on, which is what's going to happen to our cities? Because what we're seeing and what 2020 demonstrated to us is a bifurcation of rural areas and urban areas. Mm-hmm. Right? They are not the same. They don't think the same. It seems like there's just a bifurcation. What's happening?
You know what I was sitting here thinking about was 1517, 1518. Because earlier I had decided to read about Charles V, who was the Holy Roman Emperor and Spanish Emperor, who was in charge of the largest empire in the world at that time. So this is when exploration was beginning, right? what fueled that whole thing was the banks, were these powerful banking families. And so a ruler like Charles V, if he wanted to expand his power, he had to tap into the power of the new currency of that time, which was having these large banking families who could fund these really large ventures like exploration overseas.
Yep.
And at the same time being connected to the Roman Catholic Church, right? To being connected to the popes. And Charles V was elected Holy Roman Emperor because he had a really good friend who became a pope. And he had really good friends who were bankers. And so that sort of, so I was sitting here thinking, what happened in that situation? I mean, it started something that actually a whole new class of people did emerge as powerful, which would kind of be like the people now, right? It's like it's trickling down to an even broader level now, maybe with Bitcoin as you're talking about it. But then it was just creating middle class men, right? As the new people who would have some power within that structure. But we're also dealing with kind of the ripples of what happened then still today, right? Because the fact that we're sitting here is a product of the fact that this used to be part of the Spanish Empire, and then it was part of Britain, right? And I don't know, I think about it a lot. But well, you know what happened to Charles V, though, is that he ended up splitting the empire because it got too big, and he went to a monastery. He decided to leave it all behind, and actually one of the things that kind of helped turn him was he read accounts of how the native people in, I think it was even Peru, how they were being treated. Like that was one of the things that started turning him to more of a more spiritual side. And he just left it behind, gave part to his brother, part to his son, and went to a monastery. So I don't know what would happen because there's so many
what I think
parallels.
The Uranus and Taurus is going to do with the urban move to this rural move is you're going to get a bunch of people who have never been together, Uranus and Taurus with different values, and see how it's all going to mesh up, right? So that's going to be an interesting thing about great things can be built, and also at the same time there's going to be some uncomfortableness
right
on both halves, right? Because it's going to be like, oh, I'm used to like going in the city and going out to this and going to that, and tonight it's campfire night, you know? And then there's going to be those that are like, oh my gosh, these people, and they're going down the street like, you know, like with these nice cars, and they're doing this, or they're, you know, throwing a big party and they have all these people, or they're, you know, they're not taking taking care of things, or, you know what I mean? They're not taking care of the land or whatever. And that's uncomfortable. Or, you know, now there's a bunch of people at the gas station. What the hell? I've never been in a line once in the gas station. Like, you know, like these are going to be things that are going to be really weird over these next couple of years. Jupiter in Aquarius especially is expanding how society is going to function. And that is, in the first form, I would say, is that's already going to be crazy. And then people like that are in the cities are going to be like, okay, there's nothing there's no more in the city left. There's no more, like for me, living in LA and being in media, there is no media fucking in LA anymore. That's what LA, there's no character to LA anymore. It lost character. It was a city of art. It was a city of creation. Nobody's creating anymore. It's lost characters. So it's like, if you attach a city, it's got a character to it. And when the city loses the character, it doesn't have the vibration that it carries anymore. It's almost like a ghost town. And that was what was happening in Neptune and Pisces too, was like, it was the creation of cities that ended up being ghost towns later too.
Yeah.
Because remember, that was the Wild West. That was everybody coming to the ghost, or coming to on wagon trails on the Oregon Trail, and to come to do the gold rush, Neptune and Pisces. But by the end of that, those towns were just decimated and just like, they're ghost towns. I love going to ghost towns. It's one of my favorite things to do.
I was going to say, I'm like sitting here smiling.
I took her to her first ghost town,
you know what it
2011.
reminds me of? So David took me to Calico, which
Yeah.
was like this old miner's town. And
Silver mine, yeah.
Silver mine. And that's what it reminds me of. Like, even going back to LA, like, it really does. It feels like it's
Ghost
like
towns.
this weird, like, I was saying Mad Hatter's tea party on like a lot of acid, but it's like deserted, and there's just like, it's just a very weird vibration. It's lost that vibration.
Yep.
and it feels like just
But I think that
bizarre.
we're seeing what we're going to see with this new transfer of people in America moving in different states is we're going to see more of like, it was the same thing when you came on Wagon Trail out west. It was people from the east, right? And then there were some people who had held it down for a while, and they had the sheriff in the town, they had all that, and it's like, who's this new person coming in when he's wearing like East Coast clothes? He doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, what the hell is that guy coming in the saloon for? And then you see the eventual switch, and then it creates these boom towns. It was called boom towns, right? It was like boom towns, and then these boom towns are going to come, and then something else is going to come years later, and then destiny is just going to be all lost. Peace out again. When Neptune comes into Aries, it's like things just kind of go, whoa, and re-identify into new things. Now it's a civil war, and now it's like redefining and then reconstruction, and then it makes me think of the suburbs of after World War II, because after this becomes that whole suburb identity, but that was Uranus and Cancer, and that was like the idea of suburbs and how having a pool and a barbecue and like living on the same street next to people with some space and like having like my own kind of energy, but still a community element of comfort. And we're in a weird time because Uranus and Taurus is much more about everybody's coming together because of money or the value of the land or whatever. But what I think the weird thing is, and I'm just going to say this because eminent domain is something that the government can pull at any point. And that's one creepy thing about whatever was enacted through the Saturn-Pluto conjunction a year ago, is this idea of eminent domain. That no matter where you run or where you go, at any point, if there's a boom town or something, the government, and that's why I think it's very important for people to think about where this all has gone, is eminent domain can come in and say, nope, this is this. Like, they expand freeways here in Southern California at the time. Eminent domain comes in and goes, we're buying your house, we're giving you this, we're building a freeway, have a nice life, good, you're out of here. You can't just sit there and say, I'm going to stay on the fucking house. I'm not
or they
moving.
put power lines through your land or property.
Right.
Yeah, that happened to a friend of mine.
Or fires.
Yeah, right. They'll burn your place out. So but I do want to get into this because, people are probably thinking like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Because LA is they totally gutted it.
I know.
New York City, they gutted it.
And the numbers of what they're saying, I think it's double whatever they're saying, because there's at least the moving companies are saying that the number one states, New York and California, they had to just keep bringing the trucks back. Like, usually when you do U-Hauls or when you do anything, it's like,
it goes both ways.
You just keep it there. And then because people will probably come back to California just like emptied with trucks. So they're having the U-Haul people and they're having the other big people drive the trucks all the way back to then have a new person take it and then go and then have a U-Haul person take it back and then have to drive. It's for sure 1 million people fled California in 2020. I mean, as far as my calculation. Now, New York is even more. Yeah.
It's even more with New York State. So let's get into that a little bit. I do want to touch on it. I think it's important for people to know that because, you start going, oh my God, there's no place to run. There's no place to go. What am I going to do? People get into that mindset. But when one place bombs, the other place booms.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's boom. Texas is booming right now. Florida's booming right now. Idaho was booming. I was just in Idaho. It was fantastic. We had a great time. Idaho was booming. It was so fun. And so there's booms happening all over the place. And so you got to look at that, and you got to look in your life, and you got to go, okay, this place is going to die. This place is dead, or this place is done for. And you just go, let's pull it together, and we're going over there now. And I want to get into a little bit of that coming into the astrology of our times. What is that drives that movement? Like, what are the influences that drive the movement that take you from, like, I think it has something to do with, like, LA is just too lopsided of a place where if you take this element out,
it's Neptune. Neptune in Pisces was the gold rush.
Yep.
It was the idea of the new promised land, to come to the West and to find gold, right? So, but this new gold is just basic life and freedom now.
Yeah.
That's gold now.
Yeah.
Isn't
Like,
I think
so
it is
Bitcoin
nuanced.
and gold and all that, we can talk about that all day, but the ultimate gold right now is freedom. And that's wherever that is.
Yep.
That's the gold. And Neptune is seeing the dream there, and I'm going there.
Yep.
But even when you get the freedom, though, because even though there's gold, and there wasn't everybody who got gold, and it's how you use the energy. So look at like Levi Company, right? That's the company that came out of the gold rush because everybody that was looking for gold needed a pair of pants that they could wear to mine gold and walk around and do things with, because that wasn't around then. And they became the big company that came out of that, and that was the gold for them. So in these boom towns, you're going to have to think about, okay, so with freedom, what am I going to do with it? What is everybody going to need to continue freedom or to continue the whatever it is that they're going to need in that space? And so that's interesting that Joe Rogan went there, right? And he's keeping his podcast going of an open communication.
And Elon
line
Musk went there, didn't he?
Yeah, and Elon Musk is there with Tesla.
The tech companies are actually, a lot of them are moving to
a lot
Texas.
of them. Even Oracle, which is like the company that you believe it or not, most people don't know who an Oracle is, but they are a tech firm that you would never think would ever leave.
It's an $88 billion company.
They would never leave California. You would never think. They left. They went to Texas.
Yeah.
I also think that that's Uranus and Taurus, because Taurus is values and Uranus is like, I don't feel free here, so I'm going to align with a place on Earth that is more in alignment with my values, where I feel more free, more liberated. So it's like turning and changing it up completely, like changing it up. I mean, Florida, even though they try to say that they're not, I don't know, every Floridian I know is like thriving.
I know.
They're
Loving life.
thriving and so happy, and they're not
Same
on
thing
the
with
lockdowns,
Texas.
and they're doing great, and they're having their ceremonies and their gatherings, and there's just seems like it's a place to be.
Well, and even Governor Cuomo just took the same notion that the governor of Florida did by saying, if we don't open up, there's going to be nothing to open up left. It's like, oh, you just got that one.
Right.
And that's what DeSantis says was, the governor of Florida was saying that 2 months ago and just kept everything open. And he was demonized, right? So it's like interesting, the idea of demonization right now. Who's ever demonizing is actually probably the demon themselves. You know what I mean? Like,
But yeah, I want to get into that. We're getting a lot of that, where the accuser is actually the person,
right,
who is guilty of what they're accusing the other of. We're seeing that in every context.
I know.
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's
really
absolutely
wild.
amazing. And this is an harmonic thing, in my opinion. It's been getting steadily more intense, meaning that everything's getting 100% inverted in every way, in every level, in every context. What's that going? What's that? I look at that and I go, that's the coming of Ahriman. That everything you thought was real was fake. Everything you thought was fake was real.
Right.
We're getting that all over
or
the
like
place.
if we use the party system, I feel like the Republicans are more like Democrats and the Democrats are more like
There's a good
Republicans.
example.
Right? Because it's like, wow, like you're hearing Republicans talk about freedom and wanting to just keep things free. And that's one thing that as a liberal, I've always was a liberal back in the day. I voted for Obama. Like I was always like, fuck fucking McCain. Like I was all like, I want Obama. And then it's like, well, now everything's switched, right? It was like, what the heck? Like the neocons
the Democrats
Bush
sound like
energy,
neocons now.
And now what's going on in the House sounds like it's the Bush era in there. And I don't know if people are like, it's like, if you can't see that, it's like, and that's the same nodes exactly when Bush was in, and then they did the Patriot Act and they did all that stuff about terrorism and getting rid of your rights in order for the idea of protecting us. And that's what we're seeing now more through social media. They're using like social media in a way. And so there's something about the nodes when it's North Node Gemini, South Node Sag, and we're in the sorrow cycle of that eclipse cycle that was from June of 2001, and the solar eclipse we just had on December 14th was the one that was in December of 2002, and that's what brought on the Iraq War. That's what brought on 9/11. Those two eclipses, we just had we're in the sorrow cycle of that. And so there's so many different sorrow cycles with eclipses. So you might have the North and the South Node in the same signs and then have eclipses, but they don't repeat the same eclipse cycles. There's different sorrow cycles. And so the sorrow cycles we just completed here with this first round here is exactly what we saw with 9/11 and into the war of Iraq, which of course it was supposed to be with Afghanistan, but no, it went to Iraq. Like, that was the real enchilada they were after, and that was the red herring. This is the time of red herrings. Like, keep your attention here, but this is over.
That's part of it, isn't it? Right? Which is, look over here, check this, and boom, they got your watch.
And the main thing is about belief, right? So South Node and Sag is the delusion of like people who think like travel right now is easy. Like, it's not. Like, you have to really think. You have to use your North Node Gemini. Like, you might have to take this road, or I'm going to have to take a car here. Reminds me of that movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with John Candy. Like, it was just not easy to get to where they needed to go, right? It was like they took everything that they could just to get where they had to go. And then all the idea of like look at schools right now. Like, are we really learning the way we used to anymore? Like, where you're not able to have to be able to sit and talk with the teacher after class and be like, hey, so like, I don't understand this project right now, and and to be able to like open the book there and be like, oh no, hold on, let me put it on the court, oh, hold on, let me get on Zoom real quick and let me do that. And it's like the engagement of school and the school system for one more year here is going to be difficult, because that's what these things represent. But then the deeper spiritual level, it's the idea of an automatic knowing and belief system that I know better than you without looking at. It's okay to question North Node Gemini. That's the most important thing of truth, is questioning. And the idea that you can't question, and you can't put your voice out there to question, and you can't have a different question to any opinion, which really everything out there right now is an opinion. It's an opinion piece that we're living in our life through right now.
It's the battle of narratives, right?
Exactly.
We're in a battle of narratives, no question about it.
Yeah.
And so where does that end up? Where does the battle of narratives end up?
We've never seen it with the Neptune square. Exact. The nodes right now are square Neptune. The last time that Neptune and the nodes met, ironically, was the election of 2016. That exact South Node Pisces with Neptune. And so we're seeing that shock, and the square point is bringing up that shock. And so you have to ask questions like, okay, like what is going on with the election from that point? And you can't even say that word now, which is even crazier. You can't even question it, which when anybody says you can't question something, or anybody's coming at you that you can't question it, it's already in the bag, or it's just like, well, there's a bunch of things that we see suppression. This was the year of talking about how much, whether it was genders or especially races that have been suppressed. Well, now it's just ideas themselves being suppressed, and then like that's okay, but it's about the core fundamental of suppression itself. That it doesn't, that we can't suppress race, we can't suppress genders anymore, we can't suppress questions though too, and be like, there's always going to be deeper questions of things. Like, it's okay to question. It's okay to make sure that that there's audits on questions too, in all ways and forms, right? Like right now in life, right? Like, we're not auditing the science or the fact checkers and the numbers about coronavirus. We're not getting an audit. Like, the people are not auditing it.
Right.
The people are not allowed to audit anything that they don't want audited right now, which is ironic, because we get audited for taxes in life and stuff like that. And we don't have a choice. We just have to do it. Right?
Well, your numbers can't look like coronavirus numbers when you pay your taxes. That's for sure. Or any of the other numbers we're getting from the government these days.
Exactly. Because what is the government just going to be like? No, like that's who you filed your taxes at, and you say, yeah, that's the way it is, and you're just going to have to live with it. No, they like use their power and say, no, we're going to audit that, make sure. And that's the weird thing about everything right now in life, is that anything that is being questioned about getting an audit about it is completely being looked at as you are a conspiracy theorist or whatever. That'd be like you telling the government you're a conspiracy theorist for thinking that on line 5 of my K1 in my assets and my corporation that I didn't, that my accountant got it wrong. Like, And so you are a conspiracy theorist. Like, you really think that's gonna, stop the government? You know what? I'm sorry. I'm a conspiracy theorist. You're right. I'm sorry, Agent 24's apology. No.
What about the historical context of that? Like, what happens when we get to this point, right, where the government's like?
I mean, I don't know about the government, about this point with the government. I mean, but what I was thinking about was around the time, the build up to the Civil War. People went out west, right? Because
they wanted to not be part of that.
Yeah, it
divide.
was like there was this. We don't have to choose to be a part of it, right? I mean, that's what I came to the realization over the last couple of weeks, after our Christmas Eve discussion, and then somebody commented something about it being Q, and I'm just like, what is this? When I start talking about historical facts, that's cute. It's like, well, then maybe there was something right about it. I don't know. But it's just like, I could choose to get triggered by that and
or
climb
now the
in
American
and-
flag itself of the
Right.
country that it is
Yeah.
is a sign of that you are a white nationalist. That's what I've been getting called lately. Or
Well-
like it's like
The latest thing.
Like that's the latest.
Where's it
That's
going?
like the latest
Yeah.
fad. I thought, it's like wow, like
Right. So
but
we
it's
don't
like
have
that.
to
The fact
do that.
that you can't put an American flag in life right now about the country in which that
Right.
we all live in is just like
So we could buy into that and we can burn witches with everybody else, or we can be witches, or we can hit the trail and we can figure out how do we find our new place, right? Like the Oregon Trail, right?
well, that's what my family left because of Civil War.
Yeah.
They were Quakers and
And
they
I love
left
that.
and they went to Oregon to get
You're
away because that was a new territory.
But
right?
they're also they're proof that there is always a third way that we don't always
Yeah.
think about.
That's good.
Because
Good
they're
point.
Quakers. They were Quakers
Right.
who
right,
couldn't
which
fight anyway.
They're not allowed.
And then there
And
was
then-
an argument about abolition, right?
Right.
And whether were they going to settle and accept, okay, well, I guess we can admit a slave state or not.
Right.
And David's ancestors left because they didn't want to admit a
Right.
slave state.
No.
Right? So they were very opposed to slavery, for those people who think he's a white nationalist.
Correct, exactly. And I have
But-
the receipts and I have the letters from my great great grandfather on the Oregon Trail talking about it.
Yeah. And
I
so
have
they
all the
went,
letters.
they left. And what's so funny because I read the letters, right? A lot of them, which they're so fascinating. What's so funny
There was
is
a lot
that
of
they
love,
get
too.
there. Yes.
They
it
were love
was-
letters
It
in a
was
lot
so
of them.
nice.
Yeah.
But they get to Oregon and it's so funny to see pictures too of like
I know,
people a
I-
little bit after that. There was such a weird mix of people.
It was a very weird mix.
And they got along and they formed a different way, right? They
did.
did something new and
Yeah,
different.
Buffalo Bill hung out in front of my family shop. I have pictures of Buffalo Bill.
So descendants of Quakers and Buffalo Bill and
Right, exactly.
I
That's
mean,
what I'm
it-
saying, right?
oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Like, and they were not wearing Quaker. Well, my Joseph, my great grandfather, he was wearing
Like Quaker
The Quaker
Oats.
hat.
yeah, like in the first picture. My family has like the first picture of the first picture when they got to Oregon with like hay and stuff, like all like, like this. And he came on the Oregon Trail and yep, he was the one who brought the family. And then Robert, my great grandfather, he literally is like, you could tell he's kind of like, all right, are we done with this picture so I can take this off and like go look like I'm from Oregon now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like weird because I have my family has kept it all going back to the Mayflower and to all that. So it's, my Palmer line too goes all the way back into Gershom Palmer in the 1400s. So it's all traced. So it's like really weird for me to like see the way the world is and so like I have an interesting question for you all. So like they're talking about making Washington DC a state and like Puerto Rico, and I just thought of the flag. Are they going to change? So they're going to have to change the flag. There's 50 stars in that thing. What is the new flag going to look like? that they
Interesting
want?
question.
And it's like one thing that people aren't thinking about. They're just seeing these things being thrown at them, but they're not looking and being a Gemini North Node and questioning and being like, well, that means that the flag's going to change. And because of the way that your narrative is about the world and how everybody's being suppressed, but we're suppressing really questions now. What's your idea for the flag now? What is it going to look like?
Well, I think if we really meditate on it, I think we know what's going to happen. I think that certain states are going to say, we're done with this, and they're going to secede. So we're not going to get that flag. That's my gut feeling about it. Yeah. So that, because whenever I get into that thought of like, okay, well, something's going to have to change, or they're going to put Guam in, or they're going to put Puerto Rico in, or they're going to put DC in. It's like what you're saying about like, you just can't feel like Biden's not going to be the president, or something's going to happen, or it's not going to fit, or just something doesn't fit there, right?
Well,
or just energetically, it doesn't.
And I think this is a good way to wrap up this combo is the constipation you brought up. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have to go in there.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not worried about you with constipation with your diet, I want to say that anything in life, it flows naturally if it's going to work. And so somebody tried to tell me in like a comment, or it was like a DM to me about like, oh, well, like look at Trump and how hard he's fighting to get in there and it's not going with the flow. That's true. But the same goes for Biden, right? Like there's constipation in both of them at the extremes. And like they used all the Maalox that they freaking could and Pepto-Bismol over these last couple of weeks to get him or to get him to be certified. Does that make sense? Like it was a blowout, like blah, like it literally was like just shit all over the fucking everywhere. And so like, is that really a natural thing going on right now? Because it's not. And the universe and the way that it works is it's a natural flow. Like when you try to get in a love relationship and it's so off course and you're forcing this and trying the date and I'm trying to be this way and and you get to it and you're like, you get to the sex and you're like, I'm not even horny. Like, you know what I mean? It's like,
well, it's kind of like here we are this week, and we were talking about this earlier. I thought it was a fascinating subject of like, where's like the plans and all the great things and all the great teams that are gonna be put together and all this? We're not getting that. We're getting runarounds. We're gonna impeach 25th Amendment. We're gonna fight this. Then Nancy Pelosi disappears for 2 days, and then this. It's just like this doesn't fit into a holy flow,
a holy natural flow. Because honestly, if it's about unity right now, it would be about okay, like we're accepting that he won the certification. Everybody's saying it in the government too.
Yeah.
And like that's the way it works, even though people might have a disagreement about there was objections, which was ironic because after the Capitol got attacked, Nancy Pelosi wrote a letter saying we're going to go back, and the date's wrong. It says 2020, not 2021. Two, they don't cover on the media the objections all the way. They went and cut away, and then they would like talk, and then there's a constitutional crisis at this moment about that situation, which of course the media is not going to talk about. It says when you go into, especially about the Electoral Count Act, that both houses break for 2 hours, must conjoin back together immediately. It says immediately. That's not what happened in the Senate. Mitch McConnell and Schumer went and just sat there after the vote would happen and did not immediately return and they went over 2 hours too. It says 2 hours. You have to cut it there. They always cut people off, right? Like your time's up, gavel, gavel, gavel. They didn't do that for 2 hours. It went over 2 hours on all these objections, and then they didn't immediately go, and they sat there and they just the minority and the majority leader just sat there and just like rattled off what they kept wanting to do to the press, to the TV screens. So there's a constitutional crisis on that because that didn't get followed yet. That was the precedent of what Vice President Pence was like, I need to keep the precedent of the Electoral College count, and I'm just here to just be the enactor, count them votes and be done. And if there's an objection, let the objection happen and let that be followed. But that didn't get followed precisely. So it's so ironic that you can't question that, like, and there's no precedents being followed there. So it's a mess, and it's constipation at its extreme right now, and that creates hemorrhoids.
right on target. So where does this all cascade into, and what happens next?
I mean, I'm trying to understand where I don't know. Maybe
it's more forcing, right? I mean, where we're going to is there's going to be more. Okay, more push, and it's not fitting. But who cares? That's where it's going, right? So
right, because this, I mean, using Preparation H Cool Gel. It works, but really it's not shrinking it the way it really should, which is you having to make sure that you are not straining and that you're eating the right energy and food. And you might have to go on a bran diet or something.
Yeah, aloe vera.
Yeah, exactly. Natural things like that.
It helps a lot. Actually.
I was just say I don't know what the secret is that you would probably know. I didn't know maybe it was avocado either. Yeah. Maybe a little avocado to at least
avocado is good, but aloe vera is the secret.
Okay, so that makes sense. But that's the whole thing, is that what is that thing that's going to take care of that is a much more kind of patient, and but at the same time just letting something that naturally feels good.
But this is also like this thing about like unity. Meanwhile, they're going for impeachment or whatever, the 25th Amendment or whatever. This is also that doublespeak thing again, right? Which is like, it's like, hey, look over here. Boom, we're getting your watch. It's just we're getting more of that. So this is also a historical thing, right? This is like, it's gotten so extreme. I think it's going to get more extreme. What's your perspective? I'd love to hear your perspective historically on it.
My perspective through this whole year has been, and actually through all of Trump's presidency as well, as I heard people who I know reacting to everything that Trump did and freaking out, like, oh no, what are we going to do? And I would sit back and I'd go, let the system work. I mean, in our country, this is the founding fathers and people and all of the people who helped them who weren't founding fathers, they thought about all these things and they built it into the system, the checks and balances, all, So right now what we're seeing with the impeachment is the system is still working, right? They're doing something that is protected against in our system. They can sit and try to do the impeachment, but they don't have all the power. It's like all the branches have been kind of trying to grab for power through this whole time. Mm-hmm. And you can watch it happening, but then it kind of flows back into, of course, I'm a Libra, so I love the laws and the beauty of the law that's keeping the system going. Well, and I was a little bit afraid that it was going to break down.
But that was what was weird about today, was that the Congress was trying to bring forth to Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment, where the Constitution states that it's the vice president that's the one that does it. So it's like
mm-hmm. Right, they reversed it.
Like they reversed
it should have come from him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That he's the one that makes that judgment, not the the Congress does have a say and so forth after the vice president's made it. Mm-hmm. It's not the other way around.
Right.
And that was what a bunch of lawyers that came up mm-hmm. that were speaking today in Congress were saying, and it made no sense after the letter came in that Vice President Pence is not going to enact it.
Right.
And they were sitting there for 4 to 5 hours continuing the talk. Like they were continuing to do it. So it's like, it's not going to happen, but you're just doing it. And then every news station is covering it 24/7. And it's just more and more point pieces. And so it's like, why do you just keep going out? I thought, especially America as a country, like we don't like to go after anybody and just keep. I mean, that was the whole precedence of like the George Floyd case, right? Like, how could you just keep the knee on the neck for that long and just keep doing it? Yet at the same time, it's being done in a different form and fashion to anybody. And I'm not just talking about Trump, just to anybody right now that they want to. But like, it's like, how do people not see that? That's the same fucking thing. I know that some people might be like, no, it's not the same thing, but it's like the energy of just like, how do you do that to somebody? Or how does somebody like, hurt an animal? Or how does somebody like fucking like, rape a kid or steal a kid or do these kind of things or kidnap or whatever? Like how do you fight against or how do you go against those kind of notions, but do it in a uniquely similar way of just like, no, I'm just going to keep doing it to you. I'm just going to keep doing it to you. You know what I mean? And not like have people question or see that are aware of those things. And instead of like listening to the rhetoric, I think as any hermetic or spiritual energy does, is taking the information and go, okay, let me see here. Let me look around at the environment. Let me see the patterns. Let me see the synchronicities, because there's too many synchronicities, and synchronicities go also down bad roads. And I think spiritual people don't think about that enough. Is like when you see synchronicities in bad roads, it's like, oh God, like, that's not a good thing, like maybe we need to repeat that, like, which is what I think George Floyd's case brought about, like that there was still systemic racism about, and it was important for it to come up and to be brought about. It's something that had to be, and even though we could say, well, there wasn't enough, there was only nine black people who died from cops. Still, that was what got seen, and that's what got brought up, and those are things that need to be addressed. Because we do want to be a better nation, and that's what the thing is we have to be the best that we can be by bettering ourselves, but we're not going to be exactly to where we want to be at the exact second that we want to be. We have to do these things that better it. But right now we're at a point where there's no betterment right now. It's like the opposite of that. And it's like, it's weird that even like Trump saying, I'm not going to the inauguration, but it was Joe Biden's like, well, I don't even know why he even thought he's going to be there. Like, he's not allowed to be there. He's a joke, a mockery. I would never want him to be there. So it's like, but they're only using that clip of Trump not wanting to be at the inauguration, but it's Biden who's out talking about it.
Yeah, but then he says, I'm not going to be there.
Right.
that was also, that's another thing that's going on too, is there's these weird Freudian slips going on all over the place. All over the place.
Very weird.
Yeah. like there was some guys talking, I don't know, he was a mayor or something, and all of a sudden he's like, and then we're not going to have, or then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and then we're going to have a new world order, and then it's going to be this. This is just the other day. So it might have been today.
I saw that.
You saw that one?
I did.
It was another new world order thing where it's like, dude, you're like a mayor or governor or something. Like, what do you mean new world order? Like, worry about your state for a second. So what's that about? What are these Freudian permutations?
It goes into narratives.
I think it's a narrative thing, and I also think that has been something that their truth, a dark agenda truth, I guess you can call it, has to be revealed. And they have to say it. They have to express it. That's part of the universal law, that it needs to be expressed a lot of times in a covert way. And it may appear to be a Freudian slip, and maybe it is, but that they're actually expressing the agenda, and it's like right there in plain sight.
That's what I said about the apes getting coronavirus. Like, why was that such a big story from Newsom in his address to about COVID? And because it was an asymptomatic with a mask wearing trainer that deals with them. Because what they're talking about, a new variant out there. So what is it going to be, that like now it's such a strong variant that it doesn't matter if you're asymptomatic, you carry it, and you're wearing a mask, that it even spreads to apes now, like that? What are they going to do? Just be like, everybody needs to be alone in their own place so you don't spread to anybody? Like, I'm like, that's where I got like...
Well, they tried that in the beginning, in the very beginning of all this, they tried to say about dogs and cats.
Yes, that's right.
And then they saw that
was part of their whole thing for a while.
And then they were like, this is really going to set people over the edge. We can't do this.
So they pick it, and they were like, oh, well, I guess we've always been experimenting with apes, so let's just use that.
Yeah.
It could be that. It could be also, see, a lot of this, the Hollywood element, right? Remember the Planet of the Apes, and remember that the apes. Remember there was
Craig's prediction last night. His prophecy is 2021. His Planet of the Apes is back.
What?
Remember all the dogs and cats died, so they
know.
brought the apes in, right?
I know.
I just got that feeling about this ape story for some weird reason, that it had something to do with some like reference to Planet of the Apes. I've just gotten so like with the media, it's just such a gong show that they're just kind of overtly telling you ciphers,
Yes.
right? And that's what I got from that.
And something that you had brought up historically about, it was something about the banks, the families of the banks that are controlling and governing. The families of the banks are the ones actually controlling up on the hierarchy of the media, who are funding all of the media.
Yeah.
Well, in the French Revolution, they went at the same time of the American, and then they went and cut the heads off of all the people that they needed to, right? But then they ran out of money, and then they ended up having to go to the chalets of the nice homes that had all the money, and then they brought them all back in, and then they lost the revolution, basically, because of money.
What was the astrological sequence that led to the French Revolution and the guillotines? Because that's another one that's been coming up. Suddenly, guillotines in the streets, and like it's in the mix of what's happening right now.
Redcoats hung rebel traitors. That was what they would do, is like hang them. Right, that was a redcoat thing. Like you
But
hung them.
the guillotine though came up as all the people who were involved in all the changes, right? Now they turn on each other, and you have to establish order and determine who is actually going to be the new person in control. So that's what I keep waiting for, is for either the guillotine part, or then
I think
like
a lot of that was from Napoleon. I think a lot of that was from like Napoleonism, and like what France had gone through with Napoleon, and kind of not wanting to have that again. You know, it was like, I don't know.
Well, I think Napoleon actually they brought in to stop it.
Right, Napoleon came after, right?
But what I'm trying to say is that like it was like a failed thing. It's like, oh, that didn't work.
Right.
And then they like demonized Napoleon and threw him in a fucking place that was like...
Right.
His island, right? Didn't he go to like
Gitmo.
Corsica?
It was the New Age Gitmo.
Right, yeah, good call.
So I feel like it's like... Is that what they're going to try and do? I was just looking ahead. Is that what they're going to try and do? Is like, there's going to be this savior that's going to save it, who then goes too far.
Is that similar astrology to now too?
Well, yeah, I mean, the French Revolution and the American Revolution
So it's the Pluto
were hand in
thing.
hand, and they actually, without the French, we would have not won it.
Right.
And so, but that was Pluto leaving Capricorn into Aquarius. Different reasons, of course. I mean, America was just feeling like, well, both hated England, both hated the
British.
King George, right?
Yeah.
And there was so much. The French had even more of years and centuries of just tyranny against, like, the fight against the English. It was just always the English and the French and war.
500 years at least, even right at that point.
And Joan of Arc to all that. But it's like there's so much that the American or the colonialist, it was a betrayal to King George, and it was like a pride thing. Like, I am sending every redcoat I fucking got over there. And the French are gonna help him. Okay, he didn't even go after the fucking French after it. He sent Cornwallis, and he sent everybody that he had. Like, all right, and they all came over, and that's like the other thing about how the people are migrating right now, right? It was like redcoats are like, okay, yeah, like you got the tea, yeah, okay, we got our nice uniforms, and then they come in, and it's like, whoa, this is a different place, and like, whoa, and it was and that's where militias were formed, and that's why that's in the Constitution, forming. The Second Amendment is more than guns; it's militias, because it was the militias that actually, and if you watch The Patriot, they touch on that using the character of Benjamin, who is of course Mel
Cruise.
Gibson, right? Who is the one who used to be part of the Redcoat. He was an English, against the French, ironically enough, and during that whole thing when the French-Indian War was going on, right? And then he forms the militia with a Frenchman, with the Native American in there too. It's like really weird how they get that whole crew of the militia, and they're all kinds of people, and a slave too, right? And like how he was going to be freed because they said that any free man or any slave that fought in the war for 6 months would become then a free man. Go in and are taking out all the officers, and it was him who like shifted the war enough, and then it's like weird on how it looks like you're going to lose, because actually George Washington is just great for keeping it alive more than winning battles. He lost more battles than he won, but he won the war by continuing going on and keeping people, there was something about him and his image and his way that he showed up on the horse and the way that people admired that he didn't show fear in the tyranny that was going on, because the redcoats were doing brutal things. They were killing women and children. They were hanging women and children because they were part of trader homes. Like if you were a revolutionaryist and you got caught and somehow your family was involved, that's what that movie shows. And there's documents of that, of like redcoats killing women and children.
And so what's the astrological positions right then?
That was Pluto and Aquarius, technically.
Okay, yep.
Because the war, it's 1776 is the declaration. Then
Pluto's into Aquarius.
Then they got to mail that thing in a boat. You know what I mean? It's not like telegraph it over. No,
right.
You got to mail that thing in a boat.
Yep.
Then they got to send all their troops over, and that's
Yep.
in 1777. But 1778 is when you start getting into the battles.
Yeah.
And we're going to have our Pluto return.
In 2020,
which was the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
Which is it's actually next year, 2022.
It's 2022.
With Jupiter Neptune conjunct, which will be kind of, I was born with that transit. I like that transit, but it can also be the media becoming at its peak too, like of deception too, like a complete. One of the things that I thought was the most interesting about this year is how much of this whole thing on the media and life has just been a movie story, parts of it being live, but most of it's in a studio being told to you. Right, so you see clips, but then it's the narrative of the story and how they want you to see it.
Right,
you have to accept whatever
they're saying.
Right, and then coronavirus was the weirdest to me. That journalism was completely taken away. There's no journalist like going like at John Hopkins, like fucking being like, so like what the fuck's going? Like there's no journalism investigating the coronavirus.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there is, but it's not
being
exactly a corporate media phenomenon.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, like with 9/11, there was plenty of investigation, and they did an investigation committee. But then, ironically enough, there was other investigations going on. And that's what Loose Change was one of the most amazing fucking documentaries I remember watching.
That woke a lot of people up.
That was the original wake up of the whole idea of conspiracy theories. I'd say. Which in many ways, like there's undeniable stuff there that you just cannot deny. Like, I don't care what you believe, but it's just like, come on, like, you really think that they even show in the plans, and they even brought the architects that built the World Trade Center, and like, this thing, it was not meant to fall that high from a fire. And even, it doesn't matter how hot the fire is. That's what they tried to say, is, oh, because that there's fire that's way hotter that comes than jet fuel fire, right? It was like that, and watching the implosions that were perfectly set, or WTC 7, and the building
and WTC 6.
I know, exactly.
Which is rarely talked about. 8-story building, gone.
And that's where all the hard files of all the IRS was in those buildings, like all the hard files that they were moving to computer because of the 2000 crisis, right? Of like, oh gosh, we don't know what to do with computers. But all these hard files of all the IRS documents, of all the drug trafficking and all the shit and everything that's gone on in the past just got wiped away because there was no hard drives back then. The hard drives were in file cabinets, and that all just got pfft. So the whole financial system just went pfft.
Yeah.
And then you have the Pentagon, which, the plane just hits the area where there's nobody at because it's under construction, and there's no way to fly a plane that way perfectly straight, right in the tree line that's just right there to come in, and then it's different engines that are literally than the plane that they say it is, and then they just show one little thing of it, and it's like, it looks like somebody just took one thing and went and then
like a Patriot
and
missile.
then of course the one that was supposed to hit Bush in the White House ends up in Pennsylvania in a field, right? Just God, that was Supreme God that did that one, right?
Isn't it interesting how the laptops and the computers and that information is really a thing this year, where we see it with the Hunter Biden emails and all of that.
Those came out
then
this
the
weekend.
Storming of the Capitol, where they were trying to get the computers.
Right, the laptop is it. The laptop is one of these themes, right, that keeps coming back up.
It keeps on coming back.
And right, so that's
one of those things that we were just talking about. The laptop.
The laptop, yeah. Even like Anthony Weiner's laptop too. That was big.
Like just that Anthony Weiner
I know, I was just gonna
laptop, right? Hunter Biden laptop. It's just.
And speaking about those that are like pointing the finger, but then they're the ones doing all the dirt. That was Anthony Weiner. He was going out and creating all these different task forces for all these different things, and he was the one doing the dirtiest of the dirt.
That's interesting. I never really studied what he was actually doing as a politician.
Just it was.
Well, the main thing though was that the emails of Hillary Clinton were confirmed through Anthony Weiner's laptop. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing, again, with Clinton and the emails, right?
So these are all
which are all out on WikiLeaks now. Like, they're all out.
But these are all Pluto, right?
Right, it's all Pluto stuff.
It's Pluto stuff.
And then you deal with the FBI. So Pluto deals with FBI or investigative in a deeper and a more covert CIA. They just changed the CIA, or I guess Biden's changing the CIA logo. Did you guys see it? They're getting rid of like the old logo that has the American Eagle on it with the shield, and it's just CIA like in like new lettering, like, and that's it.
And it's like, why is that the first thing that he's doing?
It's very weird. Yeah,
like,
it's very weird.
Yeah, well, because the CIA really doesn't have anything to do with the United States anymore.
Right.
The CIA is it's basically a central banking protection racket, and.
Or like, why was Space Force, really done?
Formed.
And the only thing that took off into space during everybody was locked down in coronavirus was the Space Force HEMF satellite, which is top secret, but it's a high emission frequency satellite system. And then it started to come out, because I follow all this stuff, that it was like, basically they're saying that there's Russian satellites that basically they don't have lasers and shit like that, but what they are is they just aim towards satellites and try to blow it up, right? They just aim like these little satellites and go, aim towards that one and blow it up. And that this thing sends a frequency that stops it from moving or something like that. There's a lot more, though, that we're not knowing about why that's up there, or just the Harvard professor. I just showed you that article that just came out last week about how he's saying that Oumuamua, that asteroid that came in, is an alien object. It's not with a civilization of consciousness alien, because it did go against the sun, where everything else that comes in the solar system would have to revolve around the sun. Like, this thing actually went against it. And then that's freaky, because that's like, whoa. And that was on every mainstream news too. And so we're dealing in times where we're not knowing everything. That's Pluto, and this new moon's on Pluto, and that's why this conversation's gotten that deep and into all those areas. Like, you try to stay on the surface with Pluto and be like, oh yeah, so how's the Avocado doing? How's the astrology doing? Yeah, it's doing really well. How you two ladies doing in your show? Oh, now we're at this. You know what I mean? That's Pluto. Bam! Okay, let's get to that. I'm sure that it's how an FBI meeting goes at CIA. So how's it going? How's the wife doing? How's your husband doing? Okay, so yeah, all right, here we go. You want to see the shit? Fucking here, I got the fucking shit on the
pictures.
Yeah, oh my God. Look at that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, and hold on. Hey, let me in the bathroom real quick. I gotta tell you something. You know what I mean? Don't say that in the meeting. And then, so I was in the bathroom, and I gotta tell you, this is what he told me in the meeting. And, oh yeah, that's how Pluto goes. Do.
So it's Pluto and the new moon in Capricorn right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so with Uranus, it turns direct in a day and a half.
Right, because Uranus is still retrograde.
And for last planet retrograde, everything's direct. And with Jupiter squaring it exactly while it's turning on, which is an amplifier, this is going to be the biggest turn of events we've ever seen in our life. Anything that you thought was going the direction it is not. So it's the crazy of that you think you've already got it figured out. This is the most uncertain moment. And to feel that you've got everything certain is just ridiculous. Because nobody's certain on anything right now in their life. Everybody's like, well, I kind of know what I'm going towards, but it's very uncertain what it's going to feel like, how it's going to end up. And I think the more that you're in, Jupiter is just saying, just experiment and show up. And with Uranus and Taurus, you know what will feel good, and you'll ascend high once you get there, and you'll figure it out. It's a lot of dealing with learning how to deal with the moment, and how the future is built by how well you handle the moment of uncertainty, opposed to securing yourself to certainty so much as your belief systems, especially, you're going to get screwed. And that's the shock value that's coming with the sun that will be on Pluto, exactly. Because even though the new moon's 23 degrees, Pluto's 24. So as the sun is crossing Pluto, Uranus turns on with Jupiter squaring it. And Mars is right next to fucking Uranus. So that's adding even more. So you get the two energies that pump. Like, you get Arnold Schwarzenegger Mars, injected in my butt more of that fucking, I need more of that fucking testosterone and shit. I need that steroid. Mars on Uranus, and then you get Jupiter, which is Santa Claus, there's plenty of gifts. Just elves, just keep making more. Keep making more. Making more. How many more elves do we need? That's crazy. That brings the wild. That means in Uranus and Taurus is already like, oh God, I'm fucked. And remember that Uranus is the home of Aquarius, right? So Grandpapa to Saturn, who's the owner of Capricorn, and then Jupiter, which is the son of Saturn, right? It's like Saturn and Jupiter, the dad and the grandson of Grandpa, are in his house, and Grandpa's the old man, they're in my fucking house and they're fucking around and they're fucking up all my shit. And so Uranus is gonna fucking throw a hell bit, and then he's got Mars on his ass. He's got Arnold Schwarzenegger to be like, get down, actually get up, get this injection. That's how I look at astrology. But yeah, with the squares too, that's just and it's the family story of the dynamic of the grandpapa that got fucking kicked out of the universe. Saturn took control. He had a son. He ate a bunch of his kids. So no weird irony in that weird shit either about the children thing of 2020 with Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto, because that's Saturn, and Saturn is Kronos, and he does eat his children. He gets so fucking control freak that he wants to eat his own children. There was so much about that in 2020 and still going on. And mythology plays itself out. And what's crazy, though, is Grandpapa was he was the ruler of the universe, but he came from a much more higher place. And he had a higher connection to Source because he's the ruler of the heavens, basically. The way to heaven is through ascension, basically. But so Saturn, with his control rings, didn't want that. He just wanted to keep it reality-based, and I don't want anybody to see this out there. His father is exiled, and he convinces everybody, like we're seeing right now in Congress and stuff, like the exiled one, right? Everybody I'm going to control. And that's why you don't see, in mythology, you don't see temples of Saturn unless it's satanic or if it's dark. There's no Saturn temples right? It's like Jupiter temples and stuff like that. But then Jupiter's born and is Zeus and is the one who takes over his father and then basically brings his grandpapa back into the whole motion. So Jupiter's working against his grandpa, but it's almost like not against. It's almost like, I'm sorry, grandpa, I haven't figured out how to take over this whole fucking thing yet. I'm figuring it out to get you back. That's what Jupiter square Uranus is right now from a mythology standpoint of Uranus being in the bad position.
That was going to bring up a question. I had a question on that. Okay, so the timing on the 20th. How important is that timing of
Mars and Uranus?
Yeah.
That's Arnold on Uranus while it's direct. That's Frankenstein moment at its highest. But if you look at it from a 3D solar system angle, if you were to look at from where the Earth is aspected from the sun, you're going to notice that the exact alignment from Earth, you're going to look out and see Mars and Uranus exactly in that direction. And it's like, whoa. And this is going to be a moment that's going to, it's again, another unpredictable, you're no certainty, anything that is forced is just going to trigger the wound up, it's like you can't add any more duct tape to it. You can't wind it up anymore. It's just going to bing, you know what I mean? Like when you have a spring and you're like, oh, I can go a little bit more, I'm a racer, so I torque things. And I'm always the guy who go, I could torque it just one more little, I think it's not tight enough.
Yeah, then you strip it.
Bing, and then, yeah, exactly. It's like, that's Mars in your eyes. Like, just, oh shit, fuck. And that's Mars, right? Fuck, right? The war, and
Yeah,
even Taurus, like, right? I don't have the physical thing anymore I need. There's somebody losing something of physicality or something that is not going to go into manifesting fruition.
Is it 9 in the morning? When is that?
It's at 9 a.m. our time, noon
Eastern.
DC.
Interesting. Whoa.
But at that same time, Jupiter's squaring him, and then Saturn squaring Uranus, and then that's the weird one because that's where it's like grandpapa against his son who they're not getting
and
along.
they're both squaring.
Yeah.
Wow. That's gonna pop. That day's gonna
Right?
pop.
Which if
on
you take that
inauguration
mythology,
day.
is that going to be the moment where? And I'm just saying this because I'm just a truther. I'm just going to say, and I'm looking at the mythology. So we've got Biden and his son, and there's going to be things about father sons squaring. And with grandpapa, so it's like really weird too. But the main thing is Saturn square Uranus is more of like father son, from the grandpa to the son, not the grandson. And so is Hunter Biden gonna fuck his dad up with all the shit? Like there's a Durham report that's being waited to come. It was out. It's all over the place. Like the rest of the laptop got leaked, and it's the most disturbing things I've ever seen.
I think
in my life.
I've seen a lot of it.
Yeah, but the last dump got just done this weekend.
Yeah.
And it was just I couldn't even look at it.
It was gruesome.
It was gruesome. It's gruesome. It really is the laptop from hell.
It's unbelievable, actually.
It
it's
really
just
is.
unbelievable, the whole
and
thing.
So it's like that to me would be a moment where you're trying. Anybody who's going to be like, there's a forceful hand trying to take over, and like it's over torquing, and it's like. Or it's like, taking a nail and having your son be like, hold the nail, son, as I do it. And like, like.
You hit the finger.
Yeah, you hit the finger, or the sun hits the finger. Yeah, I would do the sun because it would be Saturn is in its own sign. And it's like, I'm going to do this, Dad. You hold it. You hold it. And it's like, okay. And then you hit your grandpa like, fucking, oh, fuck you. And then like this whole,
Damn. That's the next big one. Whoa.
So it's we're in nasty, and then we have Mercury going into shadow Thursday. So that means that there's a bunch of stuff that's going to come up for this Mercury retrograde coming on the 30th. That by the 20th, Mercury's in shadow. So, in Aquarius, which is everything that you think you had figured out, all the puzzle pieces are all now starting to go. It's like fading away because it's entering a shadow period of like, oh no, these are the real connecting pieces. Everything really wasn't connected yet. We need to start to figure out more of the connections. We haven't seen all the pieces and how they come together yet. That's why there's zero surety of what's coming in the next 2 weeks, and it's actually popping off here in the next 24, 36 hours.
The last Mercury retrograde that we just experienced was when the Hunter Biden laptop came out, when they found it.
Right.
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's when it all dumped out.
Yeah, in the last 2
Right.
years, Mercury retrograded in Pisces, which was spells. That's the worst place for Mercury to be, is Pisces. So it was spells that were like with
Being
no
dispelled.
information, no data. Whereas like when it came into Aquarius, this one's going to be just purely Aquarius. This one deals with technology issues. So that's another thing, is like this one's going to be weird with electrical. This one's going to be weird with technical, with Jupiter, Saturn there. And it's the buildup with the sun also coming into Aquarius that meets with Jupiter and Saturn. So that's the three biggest energies in astrology. And you had Mercury, oh gosh, the messenger of the gods, with the sun, with all that. And it's all planets that are inner planets, are not, outer planets. So it's squaring an outer planet though, which is like a hologram to me. And it's this holographic show that Mars is going to bring an identity to the hologram and force this wild hologram to be forced into this crazy. Put it this way, January 20th is not looking like a normal day at all.
That's the understatement of the week. It's probably the strangest day we've seen since the conjunction, right, of Saturn and Jupiter, the grand conjunction. And
Yeah, because that was a big deal, but the events of a year ago today and the events of this week are bigger than the grand conjunction technically, because of the fact that Jupiter and Saturn now are in the same sign again. So we're going through this, you know what I mean? They were just in Capricorn, now they're in Aquarius. So it's like they're still like battling, right? That's what happens with Jupiter and Saturn transits, is they take a minute to break apart. And Jupiter's overcome Saturn now. And so with a south node though, which is the dispositor, we call it dispositor, is like, go look at the south node, it's in Sag. So what is the sign or the planet that rules Sag? Oh, Jupiter. So the illusion is that, everything is figured out. And this is also bad science experiments. Jupiter square Uranus. Jupiter and Saturn Aquarius square Uranus. These are experiments of science that are going to go bad. And that's when everybody's going to get their second shot.
damn. Whoa.
Like, this is mad scientist energy too, right? Like the
Feels
mad.
like
Yeah.
And I use the Jerry Lewis analogy of, when he, tried to become, the Nutty Professor, the original one, not the one that was redone, but the original Nutty, where he's Jerry Lewis, and he's like the little quirky, and he tries to give himself the juice to be able to. Now he's the smooth talking, smoking fucking guy at the fucking club, But then, hey, you see, look really, you're sexy, you know what I mean? And then you're like,
It's like those Freudian slips we were talking about.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden.
That's what it is, yeah. So, I mean, anyway, I think that, a lot of people in the chat's going off. And, I know it's late and there's 800 plus people in here, but,
Well, tell them all to eat an avocado for sure.
yeah, and I think that the
help,
number one
right?
thing is uncertainty is what will bring certainty, and that's and the handrail in life right now to hold on to is changing, and that's okay. I mean, it's like when you go hiking. If you're just gonna expect the trail to be flat the whole time, well, you're not hiking. You might as well just go to the suburbs and just go walk down the street. And I think that this is a time where we're on a hike, and you can't be afraid about what's up against the next corner, and you don't know what's up at the next corner. And by just moving forward and going into it without fear, you're gonna be fine, because it's the excitement that is what uncertainty, the understatement of it is. And it's the excitement of the show that's about to go down that we don't know exactly how it's going to go down. And that's the best part, because then it wouldn't be exciting.
I totally agree. Yep. Well, there's been just so much of the fear card played.
Yeah.
Especially this last year, that it's kind of like, let's just put that card down and let's go with a different energy now.
Right.
And excitement's a really good energy for this, what's coming.
It's totally good.
Yeah. And also, it's just also being, there's a great phrase I stumbled into, and I really like it, which is, I am so comfortable in the most uncomfortable situations ever.
100%.
Right? We just go for that. Because everything's made up anyway. You might as well just make it up how you want it.
That's how Aquarius is like, you innovate by not trying to control it so much, and just by letting it be a new experience, a new way. And that's Jupiter Aquarius, do new experiences in the most radical way, because that's the only way to ascend in your life and to get better. You know, as a businessman, right? It's like if you just were to never just continually, it's a different kind of risk. It's like the risk that's not a risk, it's just a benefit. Because risks are both always benefits, but the risk of like, I don't know how this is gonna go, but there's some excitement underneath it. I might have a fear, but I'm more fearful of like, I hope it doesn't go bad, but you know what? It can't go bad because it's like, it's a prosperous opportunity of growth in a great way. Whereas a Saturn risk in Capricorn is much more like, okay, I've got my plan set and like, okay, I'm taking the big risk and I have to make a huge choice here. These are not like big choices as much as they are crazy, wild moments where it shows up like a foreign energy, because that's what Uranus and Aquarius rules, is just like, here, it just comes out of nowhere. And it's just like, do you take it? Jupiter means take it. Do you take it or not? And Saturn's kind of saying, hold on, son. Okay, I guess if it's going to bring goodness, you are Zeus. You can't overtake me, you know? So that's how Zeus gets his power anyways, is I think realizing like not being afraid of his father that eats his own children, you know what I mean? Or I guess it would be a sibling, so.
What other questions are in the chat? Anything
You
interesting?
know, everybody's just saying, oh, thank you. I mean, there was some, Demolition Man started saying, on a hike more like Niagara Falls. Joker season.
I just walked across, this is a crazy story. So I changed my plan. I was in Texas and I changed my plan to come back into Ontario, Canada. And I was like, I'm not going to fly in there. It was one of those things like changed at the last second. So I flew into Buffalo and walked across and took like a cab to the border and then walked across in the middle of the night. So I walked across that bridge, nobody there. All Niagara Falls, the whole thing, everything. I was the only one there.
Wow.
Nobody, zero, no cops, no anything. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, walk across the border, there's not a car, anything. I get across, I'm like, am I just walking? There's nobody here. Finally, like, I'm like looking like windows and stuff, and like there was a guy in one of these windows that was like the customs guy.
And he's like drinking coffee and wearing a mask and not paying attention.
Yeah, and he was just sitting there by himself.
It's like
and I was
it
like,
reminds me of like a.
I was like, are you the guy?
It reminds me of like playing a video game like the old 007 on Nintendo 64, like, you know, with the bad, you know, it's like, you know how in every video game it's like, okay, the bad guy's up there or something, and they're not paying attention. It's like, move, go down. They're not looking down.
Right?
You know
Yeah. It was one of those. Like, I
like,
literally, if I would have known he was there earlier, I would have been like, okay, he's looking the other way. Just walk right across.
Right.
There was nobody around.
That's crazy.
But right there in Niagara, that's all Nikola Tesla stuff. So you drive out of there, and it's Nikola Tesla Boulevard.
Right.
The whole thing is Nikola Tesla. He developed that whole place.
yeah, because Edison fucking didn't care about him.
The hydroelectric plant there was Nikola Tesla's design.
Yeah.
Still running.
Well,
still
and he
going.
worked with Westinghouse, Westingate or Westinghouse?
Westinghouse.
Westinghouse, who was against both of them, you know, went like, fuck, you know, honestly, Edison's revolutionary, don't get me wrong, but he ended up being more known. Of course, they give him the light bulb, but it was more about, you know, the video, you know, camera and like the phonograph and stuff. But when it comes to like how electricity was harnessed, he did not want to, he wanted to go the stupid way and like have all these, he did not want it. He was just, that. There was a great movie about that was just came out, and it was just like, wow, like Edison's not all that, you know.
Tesla's a much more interesting person,
exactly.
for sure.
And he was a foreigner too.
Yeah.
And that was another weird thing, that Edison was so like, oh, well, who are you? You're just nothing. And he had all these crazy ideas and could have fixed Edison, and Edison could have taken over it all. But then Westinghouse was just a typical American, like, I'm going to make the best out of this. And there's a scene in the movie where I guess it's a true story that Edison was supposed to meet Westinghouse and meet his wife and stuff. And they were on the train. They're like, you know what? Nah, let's just not meet him. And they were sitting at the train station, and they saw Edison fucking in the train with his wife just like fly by them. Right. And then like Westinghouse is like, fuck that guy. Like, what a piece of shit. Let's go take him out of business.
Wow. Tesla had a brother. When he was 5, his brother was 12 and died. And he said a lot of his power came from his brother. And also Tesla was hypersensitive. Like he could hear like a train 2 miles away.
Right.
And he also had like very strong sense of what was happening in the atmosphere. If there was a lightning storm even 500 miles away, he would detect it. He could detect it. So he was hypersensitive. I think that's one of the reasons why he ended up in Colorado, is he needed to be away from like the intensity. Although he ended up in New York eventually, but that was not really by choice. He was forced into that.
Yeah, New York's the first place that they lit up with light bulbs right there in front of the first Capitol building in Wall Street. That was the first electrical moment that Edison did, was right there.
Interesting.
To do his big show to prove electricity and light bulbs.
Wow.
And that he could light a city, because that was the first moment a city was lit. And it's ironic that corner is so, there's something about the first Congress and that Wall Street corner. That's where Washington was first elected. That's where the first electricity happened. That's where the Trinity Church is, that was built. That was while Washington was being inaugurated as the first president. There's so much in that corner. It's ridiculous.
There's also the whole thing. Have you tuned into the whole Star Fort thing? Okay, so Wall Street, the wall, they say it was a wall that was kept the Dutch on one side and the natives on the other side, but the evidence appears that it was a Star Fort. It's a Star Fort wall. So Wall Street is one of the walls of the Star Fort. So it's an ancient structure that was there before.
So the reason why I know about that is because my direct descendant of the Mayflowers, Isaac Allerton, he was the trader that got the money in Holland to get the Mayflower. And then when he came in, he was the lieutenant governor, the first lieutenant governor. So he was like the first vice president, because actually the Mayflower Compact is like the first example of a constitution of people creating. But after years and years, and he was doing all the trade with the natives to survive at first, and then it became, we have to pay the money back to the bankers that gave us the money for the Mayflower. So he was doing the trading, and eventually when it came to the money and all that stuff, he took some of the money for his own gain by creating his own trading post for his own self, because he was an entrepreneur. And like that's where there was a split with the whole the continuity of the Mayflower Compact, because they were very Puritan. They were like, well, you're going out and doing all this extra stuff. So he's like, yeah. And so they basically just like, okay, like go do your own thing, but you can't be part of this anymore. So then he ends up going to Wall Street and becomes the first trader to put a trading post where Wall Street is in the 1638 or 1636.
Whoa.
So my direct descendant, literally the 13th great grandfather, created the first trading post, which is at Wall Street.
Whoa.
Wow.
And he was connected with the Dutch, because all the English that were Puritans all went to Holland, but they didn't want to make their kids Dutch and speak Dutch. They wanted to be English. So that's where they fled for a while. And then they came in on Mayflower is Dutch. It's not English.
It's interesting when you're down there, like in Lower Manhattan, New Amsterdam.
Right.
It does have a little bit of an Amsterdam feel.
Correct.
It's very interesting.
Very much so. And there's something very weird about how Washington, where he took his oath, and they have a statue of him, and his arm is looking directly at Wall Street. Like his arm is open to Wall Street.
Yeah.
Right.
Like where they actually do the trading.
Yeah.
And then that Trinity Church is perfect. Like there's a lot of grid stuff that's going on there too.
Yeah.
That Trinity Church, and then if you go into that Trinity Church, that's the church where, I mean, geez, you can go on for hours of the people that founded the country and stuff, like formed that Trinity Church. Come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the bodies, it's a graveyard for that church too, of all of the first Americans that created America in there. And there's a lot about that area right there that was the beginnings. And then you could see how when they move it to Washington, D.C., they just conduct the same business, just went into like, okay, now we can really go do it in free form.
And they conduct the same energy. Because
Well,
Washington, D.C., just like where we're talking about in New York, is on specific ley lines.
Yeah.
And Tesla knew that. He knew about the ley lines and the energetic centers of the Earth, the actual like grid of the earth. He was very in tune to energy, and the certain places where he was like creating his sites were channeling that energy. It was the same thing in New York. Washington, D.C. is on a very potent ley line. That is not by coincidence.
No.
Well, it's a terrible place to build something. They must have done it for a reason, because it is a swamp. Right. So they must have been like, we've got to put it here. And they're like, well, it's a swamp. And they're like, well, we don't care.
Right.
You know, something like that had to have gone on, because it's so like marshy, swampy. Like,
true.
why there?
Well,
Something.
During the swamp.
Well,
Yeah.
it's weird.
Literally,
the
right?
reason why DC was put where it was Andrew Jackson and Washington were having fights over it, and because Andrew Jackson was from the South, he wanted it in Virginia more southern because of slaves, ironically enough. And Washington was like, no, we're not going to do that. And he wasn't about slavery, even though he did have slaves at one point in his life, but he wasn't about it. And they picked Washington, D.C. because it was surrounded by best place for trading and bringing boats in and out, but also it was like a protective energy source. And it was felt like, and that's what's weird, is the idea of North and South is split by DC.
Yeah.
You
They
know,
tuned in on that. They tuned in on that, and that was the line that Andrew Jackson and Washington. But I guess Andrew Jackson wasn't happy at the end of the day, but Washington was the president, so it was like, okay, I'm doing that. And I went in 2014, and when I went and I got to go to Capitol Hill, ironically enough, and the normal tour doesn't take you to where you can go to where you can actually go in the back and see the first slab that was laid at Capitol Hill, which actually is just behind a door. It's like literally like the most basic shit of my life, but you have to know somebody to get back there. And I get to go there, and I open the door, and there's the Freemason logo, and there's Washington's signature and like handprint, and like that's where it happened, the first slab, because he was a Mason, and he laid the first slab. Wow.
So Washington's looking over the Capitol the whole time.
Can you imagine future tours of the Capitol where they're like, here's where the QAnon shaman broke in, and here's the guy, remember the podium picture when he stole the podium? That happened here.
And here's where the random grandma carrying her July 4th American flag somehow bypassed all the police and was in the middle here with a weird picture with her chin fucking mask on, smiling for the camera.
Yeah. Bizarre.
It was all very bizarre. Well, it was great having you on and having you here, David.
Thank you so much.
It's been amazing.
Yeah, it was really great. Really fun, you guys. Thanks so much.
fun.
Yeah, I thought we covered some really great topics and very pertinent, apropos info.
100%. And so for all your stuff now, where's the best place for people to get all your work? Because I mean, you got everything. Your socials are huge, but where are you really finding right now in life that you're getting your info out the best?
Oh, I love Telegram. I've been on Telegram for years. I told people years ago, I was like, since they deleted me off YouTube, I was like, oh, I'm going to get on a place where they're not going to be able to delete me.
Right.
And eventually I found Telegram through Snowden, actually. It was Snowden he cued me into Signal and Telegram. And so I started playing around with those two apps, and eventually I was like, Telegram? Then I found out a friend of mine knew the guy who started it, Pavel Durov.
Right.
And so I got deeper and deeper into Telegram. So if you want to get on Telegram and find me, it's T as in Telegram, t.me, M-E, / David Avocado Wolfe, DAVID AVOCADO WOLFE. That's a really fun place. Or you can always find me at davidwolfe.com, DAVID WOLFE.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I've liked Telegram. Just in the last day, I think they said Telegram did a thing. It was like, we've reached over 500 million users, and it was like over 25 million of them in the last it was like
72 hours.
72 hours, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then today, the press is coming out and being like, "Oh yeah, everybody on Telegram it's all conspiracy."
Oh
It's
yeah,
like,
they're QAnon shamans or whatever.
So 500 million people, more people that's in America are all conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
like, oh,
that
okay.
makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so
what, you're
silly.
going to screw all 500 million people out of using Telegram because what? You're telling everybody that's on there now? Like, wow.
It's crazy what they say. It's just, they'll say anything. It's just pure, it's gotten to a point of just absurd propaganda.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
And that's kind of a good sign because it means it's not working.
Yeah, it's not working.
Their audience has been abandoned. I mean, it's harder and harder for me to even, like, if it's a CNN link, even, like, I will never watch any CNN stuff anymore. But if it's a link, I'll be like, no. And I'll just, it's like, it's gotten to that point where
it's opinion.
Yeah.
Like the journalist is not going outside and going to the place and talking.
Yeah, no, it's propaganda.
It's scripted.
It's scripted. It's propaganda, and it's Goebbels style propaganda even too, which is they just hammer certain points over and over and over again, relentlessly. Like, let's beat them over the head with this point again and again and again. And it's like, actually, I don't want to be beat over the head with that point, and I actually don't want anything to do with you. And so that's actually been a big thing in my life. I actually have not watched TV in 30 years. I'm just not a TV watcher. Yeah. And so people have been like, well, how do you find out what's going on? It's like, people will tell you if you really need to know what's going on. Then eventually I started with Twitter, and I started with Twitter in 2007. And then it eventually I just did all my own social media, which I still do today. And I just do it all independently. So my Twitter's different than my Gab. Gab is different than Parler. Right. Parler's different than Telegram. Telegram is different than Instagram. Instagram's different than Facebook. I do them all differently. And people are like, how do you do that all in one day? It's because I've been doing it from the very beginning, and I have a mind for it. You have to be a certain type of person. Yeah. And so I'll be like, oh, I got to put this out on Twitter right now. Okay, I'm going to put this out on Parler. That's a Parler thing. Just whatever it is. And eventually I became good at it. Yeah. Right. After all those years, you become good at stuff. And I really like it. I really have a lot of fun with it. So all my news resourcing now, like how I'm pulling it all together, it's just a complete, it's magic.
Well, it's like the way it was probably right before the revolution, the Declaration of Independence. People were giving information to each other and pamphlets to each other. And
drawing in from this source and from me over here. And let me check that against this. Oh, I'm looking over here.
And you know what? The whole idea of that's just hearsay or scuttlebutt, because I was in the Navy. Like, believe it or not, it was the scuttlebutt. It was Paul Revere. Even though Paul Revere was drunk and didn't really do the whole ride all the way down all 13 colonies, and then just kept sending the message and everybody just kept going with it. But he was the one who did say the British are coming, and they did get down. But it's like what was it? You had the cans, telephone, it's like that right now. And in many ways, I think people trust people now more than they trust,
the media, for sure. The media's lost any kind of, they lost any kind of validity or any kind of authority this year. Right. In 2020, just obliterated their whole position, which is, their scheme, which is good. It's beautiful because it puts people who don't know where to go with it all. It puts them into an uncertainty. It puts them into a floating position. It's like, great. Okay, now we got you there. Now it's like, okay, now we're going to put this in front of you and that right here. Now look at all these other things that they weren't showing you.
I know.
And it's fun. I love doing that.
It is. Yeah. But I think what's the last thing I want to say here is First Amendment, freedom of speech and so forth, right? It's really a deeper meaning. It's a freedom of mind. Because speech is something that you can choose to do or not do, and also what you hear and what you want to take in and think about or speak about or not. It's much deeper than that. And so you're allowed to have freedom of mind. You're allowed to say, I don't want to like CNN, or I don't want to read that, or I don't have to take in this information. And that's one thing that, people don't go deeper into unless you get into some constitutional scholar energy or whatever. But that's the one thing, is that your mind is allowed to be free to be as it is. And that's something that, I think people need to realize at this point, that you can't force other people to see. We can't force other people to, if whatever our opinions might be or whatever our stuff that we find is true, to be true to other people. And that's okay. It's like, that's the beautiful part of the country.
It's beautiful. It's any other thing than that is you think you're a god, actually.
Exactly.
If you're not open to everybody's opinion and be like, well, I agree with that or not, or I could be wrong, or if you're into some kind of a thing like, no, it's this, then you think you're a god,
right?
So that's what I've been telling these young kids who they hit me out up on Instagram and they're like, I can't believe that you said that Trump is better than Biden on this issue, and they're like going berserk. I'm like, what are you, a god?
I know.
So you know everything?
I know.
And it's interesting, like how, especially the young people today, maybe they're always like that, I don't know, but they're just so driven into some narrative, could be something, other than politics, but they're so driven into a narrative that I'm just like, so you're really certain about that? Like, did a God tell you, or are you a God?
Right.
It's interesting. And I don't usually get responses whenever I come out at it with that, because I think they're usually looking for like more of a conflict or something. And I'm just like, it's just interesting that you have this opinion, but it's just an opinion. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it's a belief, South Node in Sagittarius, and really just holding on to certain belief systems, which, and I've said this before a lot in like Venus After Dark, that a belief is really a placeholder for knowing.
Well said.
Even an opinion
Yep.
is a placeholder for that. And with the North Node in Gemini, it is about discerning our truth. Gemini is mutable energy. It's like, it's supposed to change. We're supposed to question and figure it out. This is
And it's
about
youthful,
figuring
too.
it out. And it is. It's very
Where Sag is
youthful
like
and
the
innocent.
elder, old, like wise, like no, and that can become kind of godlike. Like, I am the all-knowing, like way to do meditation on the mountain. You're not doing it right. It's like,
Yeah. Well, it's mercurial. it's the messenger of the gods, really.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's defining our
that
truth.
is true. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, the messenger of the gods. And that's why it's also really beautiful, because just as much as there is a negative, nefarious force or destructive agenda, the light is there, and it's anchored in, and people are rising up and remembering that we are divine beings and coming back to that truth. We're remembering who we are, and we're shining light into all of these dark places that need to be illuminated. This is very Plutonian, into the deepest, darkest shadows that need to be illuminated to bring it back into light, to bring it back into holiness and the wholeness, to bring it back to the divine.
I'd say that that's the best way to aloe vera this hemorrhoid.
People will be like, yeah, I watched that whole thing, and dude, I got something better than Preparation H.
Yeah.
Aloe vera. Yeah. Aloe vera is
And it's
healing
better
in all
than-
ways.
it's better
though. It's
than
good
the
for your
wipes.
skin. It's good for your, yeah.
But it's true though. I mean, honestly, like with the sun or anything, aloe vera, like from the plant when you just cut it.
It's good for
Oh,
your
yeah.
skin.
Like
No,
that,
it's nothing better.
it's
Nothing
like it's
better.
one of those things where you're just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's miraculously able to heal epithelial cells, which are the cells that cover all of our body and all the hollow organs in the inside, our digestive canal, all the way right through.
Even aloe vera, like drink, like water, like is good. Like,
Yeah,
there's something
heck
about
yeah.
aloe vera water. It's like bomb.
It's awesome. I mean, aloe vera is one of the great superfoods in the world, in my opinion.
Really?
Yeah, especially if you're living here in Southern California. It's just one of the most important superfoods for this.
Environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you all know where to find Mr. Avocado himself, who is a Leo, by the way. Some people want to know he's got a Leo or a Libra moon. I won't give it all away. And it was great, of course, having the ladies of High Vibe here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks you guys. That was wonderful. Yeah, it was really good.
Erika's got her new course that you can, she just did one tonight, and don't worry, there's 7 more courses, and you can watch the recording and catch up. You just go to highvibe.tv, go click on school or highvibetvschool.com. And then I'm sure they have a Herstory coming out here soon with Tamara
On Thursday.
on
right?
Thursday.
Yeah, we're going to be shooting.
I'm probably
an
not doing
episode.
spiritual dance music tonight because of the timing. So we'll probably do that tomorrow at some time. So I appreciate you all. Appreciate having David, you here. And we love you all. Send the best out and spread this out to your friends and fam if you feel that it's relevant to them. And we'll see you on High Vibe. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, you guys. Best ever.
Best ever.